Good morning. It is 9 a.m. today, being Wednesday, December 14th, 2022. I'll call it to order the Board of Investments meeting. Linda?
Thank you, Chair Santos. This meeting is being conducted as a virtual and an in-person meeting, so I will do a roll call of the trustees to confirm attendance. Mr. Knox?
Good morning, I'm here.
Mr. Green?
Good morning.
Mr. Kehoe?
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Ms. Greenwood?
Good morning.
Good morning. Mr. Jones?
Present.
Mrs. Jones? Okay. Mr. Kelly?
Present.
Ms. Sanchez?
Present.
Mrs. Jones? And Chair Santos?
Here.
Okay, staff participating in the meeting include the following: CIO John Grable, CEO Santos Cramen, Chief Counsel Stephen Rice, Interim CFO Ted Granger, Legislative Affairs Officer Barry Liu, AEO Laura Guglielmo, and Administrative Division Acting Division Manager Roberta Van Nortrick. Investment staff include Vache Masarajian, Christopher Wagner, Scott Drazel, Jude Perez, Esmeralda Del Bosque, Jim Rice, Krista Powell, Cindy Rivera, Magdalia Armstrong, Dale Johnson, Cheryl Liu, Calvin Chang, Noah Adamski, Chad Timka, Pushpam Jain, Kwok Wen, Tara Elijah, and Ron Sankanwa. Consultants include Makita, Alborn, Stepstone, and Milliman. Trustees, please use the raise your hand option to be placed in the queue. At this time, we ask all meeting participants to mute their mics until you're ready to speak. And now we may proceed with the agenda.
Great, thank you, Linda. Next item is the approval of the minutes for the November 9th, 2022 meeting.
I'll move it.
I'll second that. It's David.
It's been moved and duly second. Any corrections? Changes? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Mr. Knox?
Aye.
Mr. Green?
Aye.
Mr. Kehoe?
Aye.
Ms. Greenwood?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly?
Yes.
Ms. Sanchez?
Aye.
And Chair Santos.
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Great, thank you. Next item is item 3, public comment. My understanding is that there is no requests.
Correct.
Great, thank you. Next item is the CEO report. Mr. Cramen?
Yes, Chair Santos, trustees, good morning. Very brief CEO report. Wanted to let you all know that we are moving forward with the strategic plan. We've had really good meetings and excellent input from the advisory team. We plan on going to the offsite with the strategic plan, the draft strategic plan in February. And so we'll have a much more robust discussion about the elements of the strategic plan with the BOR at the BOR offsite. And of course, all BOI trustees are welcomed to attend and participate in that meeting as well. I wanted to clarify one point in terms of the new board member. Ms. Greenwood will be serving on the Board of Retirement. She's actually rotating off of the Board of Investments this upcoming January. So I want to welcome Ms. Greenwood to the Board of Retirement and to look forward to continue working with her. Next month is a big month for the team. The trustees are going to see some changes to how we conduct our meetings and the tools that are used for the trustees. We're switching over from Board Vantage over to PrimeGov. I would encourage all of you to attend the very good training sessions and review the board training materials that Bonnie and Linda and the team have put together. And so I don't want to jinx anybody, but I just want to thank the team for all of their hard work up to this particular point. We're looking for a successful launch in January. Believe me, everybody's been working very, very hard to make sure that that happens. So I did want to let you all know that the Deputy Chief Investment Officer position is out on the street. Recruitment is moving forward. EFL Associates is the firm, the recruitment firm that is assisting us with that. We're also in the process of looking over the Chief Financial Officer positions, and EFL will be assisting us with development of that particular recruitment as well. I'm working with Mr. Grable to look at other opportunities to leverage outside recruitment resources to assist him in identifying a good candidate pool, a larger candidate pool for some specific positions that he needs. We're doing the same with Mr. Rice in terms of his need for investment attorneys, benefit attorney. And so we're moving very, very quickly on those particular exams and recruitments. With that, I think that concludes my report. I'm be more than happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kryman. Any questions for Mr. Kryman?
I have one question.
Yes.
One of the challenges.
Ms. Sanchez, we have Ms. Jones, Mrs. Jones first, and then you after that. It's Ms. Jones.
Good morning. I just had a question because I just wanted some understanding. When I look at your member snapshot and in the report, total retirements to date are 1,111. And I was curious, is this on par with the previous year, or are we a little, is it normal? I'm just trying to understand if our retirement rate is slowing down now. Was it just a spike last year, or are we still at the same pace that we were at this time last year?
Yeah. I believe Mr. Popovich can answer that question, but my understanding is that there's no slowdown. Just put it that way.
Okay.
Continuing to increase, but because of the patterns of individuals retiring, we get certain spikes, and so it's difficult to forecast where we're going to be at the end. But Mr. Popovich can answer very quickly if he wants to add something to it.
I think Mr. Kryman is correct. We're about on par, but the real proof in the pudding will start to show up as we start to see the November numbers come in, and then December, and then all through the March Madness.
Gotcha.
There's a slight dip in the interest in retirement as we see the call volumes dropped a little bit. The same percentage of the calls are retirement calls, but because the overall call volume has dropped a little bit, that means there's slightly less interest in retirement. And that's likely because the county recent negotiations were pretty good. So typically when we see that, members want to take advantage of a full, a year's worth of salary for our legacy members so that they can max that out. So we might see a dip. That has been the historic trend, but we'll see whether that holds true as we get into March Madness.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
And just to follow up on that, if I may, Mr. Popovich, because of the rate of inflation is so high today, historically, have we seen a decrease in the interest for county employees to retire when the economics in the country as well as globally are not as rosy as the other times?
I don't think we've actually sat down and empirically looked at whether interest rates and the economy has an impact. Although I can tell you during the Great Recession, there was a dip in interest, obviously, because people were worried. So we'll take a look at that and see if we can correlate that, if there's anything there.
Great, thank you. Ms. Sanchez?
Yes, I have a question for Mr. Kryman.
One of the issues that we've had with recruitment is the time it is taking to complete the process. Have we done anything to address that and shorten that? Because I think it's not appropriate to have to sort of do the process, go through the effort, and then lose the candidate because it takes us so long to do it, and then we have to start over.
Yeah, for the hard recruit positions, we've begun using outside recruiters. We think that that will accelerate the development of the candidate pool. Mr. Grable has his process that he likes to use in terms of interviewing and making sure and vetting the candidates. So we have tried to improve the timing. It has taken us some time. We had some difficulty, some things that we had to overcome in terms of, job descriptions and some of the bureaucratic issues that we had to address because of a civil service. We're in a civil service environment, and I'm talking about, for the accountants and other positions. And so we are looking at that. We believe that we're going to have some improvement because we have hired some additional human resources personnel, which limited our ability to really go out and aggressively recruit multiple positions at the same time. And so we're on that. I know that Mr. Knox has raised issues at the Board of Retirement in terms of our hiring of IT personnel. And so we're focusing our attention on that. But in terms of the high difficult to recruit, I won't say difficult to recruit, the specialized recruitments on investments and in the legal side, and even some accounting positions, we're going to be using outside resources at this point. Hopefully that will accelerate the hiring.
Thank you. I think short of seeing incredible progress there, I think this is going to start to look like a real failure. So I would say that you should make that a priority.
Yes, I agree. We all agree.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Sanchez. I agree with Ms. Sanchez, and I welcome outside recruiters to help us with the hiring the investment staff. And I will even go as far as saying all investments, all vacancies in the investment staff, and perhaps legal, we should use outside firm. This morning in the committee meeting, we heard the work that has been done in transitioning the real estate portfolio to a system that it works, because the real estate portfolio was working. And it's really disappointing to me that while I praise James Rice and the team for the work they have done, it is really disappointing to me to see Mr. Grable's and staff implementation of the new program for real estate, and yet in 2 years, we haven't been able to retain the principal investment officer for that particular portfolio, in the two of them. We lost 2 top staff there. So again, I praise the staff for all the work that they have done, but we have to do better. 2 years is just way too long. So I welcome the fact that we're going to be using outside recruiters, because we need to be more nimble. So I don't know. Perhaps I will talk to Mr. Pryor. Maybe we should have a leadership meeting of the boards and the management of the organization to develop a more aggressive plan in terms of curing the problems that we have with recruitment. It's just way too long. And I know that the staff been listening to us, but we need to do better. That's the bottom line. Anyway, thank you very much. Anybody else? Ms. Jones.
Well, I just had a question for staff. If they felt like, because I know right now it's very difficult recruiting high-level positions. we have the challenge ourselves. But I was curious if bonus or signing bonus or any kind of incentive of that form has been discussed, if you think that it would be helpful, not just for the applicants, but also for any staff that refer an employee to LACERA, that they, may know, and the caliber of work that they do is equivalent to what LACERA is looking for. So has that been considered? Do you think it'll be helpful? I'm just curious.
We have not, well, actually, I have asked my legal team to take a look at the authority that the CEO of LACERA has in terms of providing bonuses to staff. We haven't had an extensive conversation about specific items. I know that Mr. Santos, for example, or Chair Santos was thinking about tuition forgiveness, for example, as a recruiting tool. Signing bonuses, I don't think we've ever done something like that, but we can certainly look into it. I'm not sure that we have the authority to do that because the civil service rules are pretty prescriptive in terms of what we can and can't do. But I know that the sheriff, for example, has used that particular tactic at one point in time, but I believe that had to do with shortages and there were certain findings that needed to be done, if I recall that correctly, when I was over on the county side. So hopefully that answers your question, but we will certainly investigate what the realm of possibility is. And we'll deal with it, quite frankly, when we begin vetting the candidates and we begin negotiating contracts with them or employment terms with them.
Mr.
Sounds
Kehoe? I'm sorry, Ms. Jones, would you done?
Yes, thank
Okay,
you.
great. Thank you, Mr. Kehoe.
Thank you. So I'm having a deja vu moment because I know we've had this conversation before, and I'm going to say the same thing that I said back then, which is that we absolutely can do a sign-on bonus. We've done it before. Multiple law enforcement agencies do it. Multiple government agencies do it. So we absolutely can. And I encourage then, and I encourage now to do it. And you don't do you don't do that during the salary negotiations of hiring an employee. The purpose of that is to get people to apply and to encourage your staff of 400 employees to be recruiters themselves. So that's the purpose. And the sooner you get that up and running, the better it's going to be on getting people out there to apply. Now you can craft that as a retention tool by saying, okay, we're going to give you a $10,000 bonus every year for the next 5 years, as long as you stay here. Some agencies do that, but the main benefit is recruiting and getting all your employees out there to recruit and getting people to consider signing on because they're going to get a bigger chunk by doing that. So I'm happy to talk offline and give my opinion to anybody over there, staff that needs it, or the research is out there. It's a good tool. I highly encourage it. But one other thing that I noticed that I just scratched my head on is that we're always talking about we have limited staff to run multiple recruitments at one time. If you get on the County of Los Angeles website and look at the number of job openings, there's like 400 different positions that they're hiring for, many multiple positions. I just don't understand why we can't manage multiple pools of applicants and multiple job openings at one time and have it open as an open competitive. I understand it's more difficult to hire highly skilled, highly trained, and upper level positions because it's a smaller pool and you have to do more active recruiting. So I'm fully in support of having recruiters for that. But for some of the line and entry and journeyman level positions, I just don't understand why they're not open all of the time and why we're not actively recruiting all the time and vetting people all the time. Because you never know when that person is going to be out there doing a Google search because they want to move to Southern California for family reasons. And if we're only doing it at certain times for certain right now. I get it. We all understand that. But there's just a lot of things that I'm scratching my head on from somebody on the outside looking in, and I think we can do a lot of improvement. So those are my thoughts, and I leave it to staff to run with.
Great, thank you, Mr. Kehoe. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. Santos, I did just want to remind you that you do have in the county ordinance, you do have placement authority for high-level positions that are part of the MAPP program. You have placement authority up to 75% quartile. So that's more discretion than other folks have within the county organization. So
Right.
I just want to mention it. Thank you.
We have been exercising that in terms of promotions and recruitment. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Kelly. Just one last item on this issue that I would like to again ask for the organization to evaluate incentive pay. It's something that we should be looking at and have the board evaluate any findings because we need to make the changes necessary in order to keep the staff recruit and retain. Anyway, thank you. Mr. Knox.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just for clarification, when you mention incentive pay, is that inclusive of bonuses and signing bonuses and elimination of things like student debt, or is that going to consider or also look into performance-based pay based on, for example, on the investment side, investment results and the like, just because that's something I've seen. I read the other day that CalPERS was making some tweaks to their incentive-based pay structure, and I'm not lobbying or advocating for that. I'm just, if we're going to be looking at this, I think we ought to look holistically and see what else might be there, what other options we could consider.
I agree with you, Mr. Knox. I think it should be all of the above. And for the staff to evaluate and any studies that needs to be done and bring the report with a recommendation to the boards and let the board decide what's the best way to go. But yeah, we should look at all possible avenues with regards to that.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I'm sorry, Mr. Kryman, were you going to say something?
No, thank you for your input.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Moving forward, CIO report.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, trustees. It is hard to believe that this is the last meeting of the year. And we're finishing with, maybe our longest meeting. We have a full agenda today, so I'll try to do something that's difficult for me, which is to go through this report in an expeditious manner. A big thank you to Pushpam for driving the slides today. So thank you. And if we can begin on slide 4. This says, global market performance as of November 30, 2022. I would say that November was a good year for major asset categories. If we see on the top left that the broad equity market was up 7.6% for the month. So I said November was a good year. And given that our actuarial target is 7%, for a year to get over 7% in a month is not what we expect, recognizing that, over year to date, markets are still down over 15%, but that November is a very strong month. On the bottom right, we can see that investment grade bonds were up 3.7% as interest rates came down. And one other thing, if we look at the bottom left, the MSCI Emerging Market Index, you can see that after a long period of underperformance, emerging market equities were up close to 15% for the month. If you look at over the longer time periods of the 1, 3, 5, and 10 years, the emerging markets still have underperformed, but November was clearly a strong month. If we could turn to slide 9. Slide 9 shows a total fund summary as of the end of October. The fund NAV or market value was close to $69 billion as of the end of the month. As of today, it's a little bit over 71 in the flash report. So the markets have continued to perform. Recently, the Federal Reserve is meeting later today. There may be some type of market gyration later, but the fund has moved nicely over the last couple of months. As the slide shows, the monthly return net is a very important number. We have a fee, our investment cost analysis later this morning. The net return was 2% for the month. We finished the month with close to $900 million in cash, and the asset allocation is on the right side of the page. And as we turn to slide number 10, I'll begin at the bottom. OPEB, the net asset value is about $2.5 billion, up 3.6% for the month. That difference is based upon a different asset allocation and a higher exposure to public markets. The pension at the top, I'll review 2 points that are really kind of embedded, represented within those numbers. And, last month, Ms. Jones asked a question about our relative performance versus our peers. And in this board book, later on, page 870 for the public, it's part of the public package, but it's really within all these numbers on this page. The answer to our performance relative to peers, and I'm somewhat reluctant just because I don't like, we're down, for the 3 months, we're down, 4.7%, but our relative ranking, the percentile with a lower number being better for the quarter, the 1, 3, 5, 10, 25 years is 23rd percentile, 6th percentile, 12th percentile, 11th percentile, 8th percentile, and 3rd percentile. So my takeaway from that is that our collectively, board, staff, LACERA, our policies and initiatives appear to be working to some degree. I think that we've had, nice performance vis-a-vis peers. We can't outmarket the market, so to speak. If the markets are kind of the true governor of our performance, if our benchmark's down, over 4%, we're going to be down around 4%. So, but I think that it's really important, and it frames our discussion for today as we talk a lot, as we will talk later about various initiatives. What we're doing appears to be, working. With that said, as it relates to what's working, I'll undermine that to a little bit right now, in that the fund is below its policy benchmark for the month and the quarter. We've had a very nice stretch of above benchmark performance, and 1 month doesn't make a trend. As it relates to the drivers for the month, some of that is is real assets, where real assets, as we move into private assets from public markets, there's what's called a J curve, that the losses and the expenses materialize first. And private equity is probably the biggest driver. Private equity was below its benchmark by 720 basis points. And that's 120% of our underperformance for the month. And that's a result of general partners, that the firms that we invest with in private equity are beginning to mark down their portfolios. And we've benefited from the reverse of this. With private equity, those valuations are lagged. So, we outperformed. Much of a contributor to that was the private equity practice of lagging valuation. And as this reverses, it really highlights the temporal mismatch between public and private markets and valuation methodologies. With that said, long-term, we expect to earn a premium to public equity in our private equity portfolio. Our policy benchmark is that premium is at least 200%, and we have. Private equity is a strength of our program. Short-term benchmarks for illiquid assets are imprecise, but it's something that we review every time we do a strategic asset allocation, is various benchmarking methodologies, and we'll begin next year with our next strategic asset allocations. It's that time of our cycle. Again, my favorite part of being a CIO, but we'll discuss benchmarks next year. And with that, I'm happy, Mr. Chair, to take any questions that trustees may have.
Great, thank you. Any questions?
I had a
Mr.
question.
Grable? Who's that?
Joe
Mr.
Kelly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you. I don't have a question, John. I have a comment. I want to congratulate you on your inclusion in the short list of CIO superstars. It was great. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah, I have a comment, Mr. Grable. The J curve, especially with private equity, that's also an indication of how aggressive we have been in terms of deploying our funds in private equity, right? I mean, it's interesting to me because at the very beginning you see the dip, and then as they begin to implement their strategy, you see the numbers return. So to me, when we're talking about private equity, that tells me that we've been pretty aggressive in terms of deploying and finding those great managers up there. And perhaps Mr. Wagner knows what percentage of a target allocation or a goal that we set for this year of deployment of private equity funds. But it appears to me, based on all the numbers that we have seen, all the approvals over the years, that we've been, every meeting that we have, we are approving some item in private equity. So thank you for that presentation, Mr. Grable. I do want to join Mr. Kelly in congratulating you in your recognition. One of the things that I've been very proud of the work that you have done, not only internally, how you have positioned a portfolio in a very positive way, and the changes that you have made in-house, but also I admire the fact that you are always willing to be public, to be interviewed in different settings, and putting forward your ideas as far as how you are running this portfolio, our portfolio. So it's not surprising to me to see you being recognized, because in my view, and looking at the different people that were evaluated, you are the top, in my view. So congratulations, thank you, continues to make us proud. It is wonderful. I remember the years past where the CIOs at the time were not as active as you have been, even though we should always be proud of the work that we do. And so I welcome that. So thank you, Mr. Grable. Keep up the good work, and happy holidays for you and your family. And anybody else, any other comments? All right, hearing none, we're moving forward. Let me find my place on the agenda here real quick. All right, so we're going to consent items. That will be item 5. I received a request to pull item A as an apple and item D as in David. So at this point, I'm calling item A. I will entertain a motion with regards to AB 361 and
So
Government
moved.
Code 54953, subsection E3. Great, thank you very much. It's been moved and second. Any comments? Roll call.
Mr. Knox,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Mr. Kehoe,
Aye.
Ms. Greenwood,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mrs. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Kelly,
No,
Ms. Sanchez,
Aye.
Chair Santos.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes with 1 no.
Okay, thank you very much. At this point, I'm going to call subsection D as in David regarding the amended budget. I will entertain the motion
Move
for that
approval.
item. It's been moved.
I'll second that. This is David. I'll second that.
It's been moved and second. Any questions, comments?
comment,
Hearing
Mr.
none.
Chair. Comment, Mr. Chair. Joe Kelly here.
Okay, Mr. Kelly,
Yeah,
please raise your hand so I can see you, okay?
Yes,
Please, thank you, Mr. Kelly.
I intend to vote no on this item. I appreciate staff's efforts in pulling the numbers together and informing us about them, but the mid-year budget adjustments include an increase in this agency's temporary budget of nearly $2 million. And for the 8 years that I've been here, we've been talking about decreasing utilization of temp staff. And yet we see another allocation. It's going to be up to upwards of $8 million we spend in temporary staff, and I just can't support that. So I intend to vote no on this item.
But just to follow up on Mr. Kelly's point, yeah, the other issue in my mind is that we have all these vacancies. I believe it was 23%, if I remember correctly. So we should be making every effort to fill those positions before we ask for additional budget allocation for additional positions. Let's concentrate on getting people, our positions filled, and then we go forward. Mr. Kehoe.
Thank you. I just want to say that I am in support of the motion, and I appreciate staff's effort on this when it comes to mid-year budget adjustment. In the past, historically, we have not always done that properly. Frankly, we've over budgeted, so we've had to do mid-year budgets because we over budgeted. And it's nice to see us actually doing it the way that we should be doing it, so that we can identify issues just like Mr. Kelly brought up. That being said, I do have concerns over that. I think we've made our concerns very well known to staff. I would not want to take the entire budget for, we're not Congress, so I don't want to take our entire budget over this issue. I think we direct staff to get moving on this. I think they know, and I think we'll be in a better place by this time next year.
Thank you, Mr. Kehoe, and yes, I also support the motion. Any other comments? Seeing none, roll call.
Mr. Knox,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Mr. Kehoe,
Aye.
Ms. Greenwood,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mrs. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Kelly,
No.
Ms. Sanchez,
Aye.
Chair Santos.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes with 1 no.
Great, thank you very much. At this point, I will entertain a motion to approve subsection B, C, and B and C, those items.
So moved.
I'll second.
It's been moved and duly second. Any questions, comments? Hearing none, roll call.
Okay,
Please.
Mr. Kelly made the motion, Mr. Knox seconded. Mr. Knox,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Mr. Kehoe,
Aye.
Ms. Greenwood,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mrs. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Kelly,
Oh, yes.
Ms. Sanchez,
Aye.
Chair Santos.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Great, thank you very much. Moving to item 6, non-consent items, subsection 8, revised investment beliefs. Mr. Grable.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I believe that Tim is going to start the presentation. I think, Tim, you may have to turn your camera. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the board. We're here to discuss a refreshed set of investment beliefs. Before we get into the presentation, I just want to highlight a few key points. The first is that the investment beliefs really form the cornerstone of LACERA's overall approach to markets, how you assess risk and return, and your overall investment activities. The first set of investment beliefs was developed by the board in collaboration with Makita and staff in 2016. It was then later incorporated into the IPS, which further demonstrates that role as the cornerstone of LACERA's investment activities. The investment beliefs are designed to be durable, much like the investment policy statement, but it's still prudent to review these from time to time to reflect various changes, not just with the markets, but also with organizations like yourself. In this particular case, LACERA's strategic initiative to evolve from an asset allocator to a best-in-class investor, I think, is a really principal consideration in the revised investment beliefs that are presented today. Over the years since 2016, LACERA has grown in assets, but also resources, capabilities, sophistication to access markets in different ways to influence terms and fees and various other important considerations. So overall, this has been a collaborative process. It started in 2021 with a presentation at the board offsite, was then followed up this year at the offsite as well with a lively discussion and a survey that was run by staff to get feedback. And really that feedback has driven multiple months of work and many iterations back and forth on this document. Staff's been meeting weekly. Makita has been joining in on the majority of those meetings, and that's what formed the basis here. But ideally, what's presented here is not supposed to be the views of Makita or the views of staff. This is supposed to be the voice of the board coming through and expressing these investment beliefs. And then just to further frame the issue, in your overall meeting packets, you also have a red line copy, a clean copy, a full copy of the IPS, and then also a concurrence memo, and all that should be taken into consideration. And with that, I'll turn it over to staff to do the rest of the presentation.
Thanks, Tim. So the recommendation before us is to approve the investment beliefs. These are revisions that we'll go through one by one. Again, our intent here is to reflect the discussions and the survey feedback that we've received so far. On to the next slide, please. Okay. This is a timeline that we've seen before. This we reviewed in our offsite discussion. We started with an adoption by LACERA's on LACERA's behalf of the Statement of Investment Beliefs back in 2016. Over the years, we've revisited and revised the IPS and also incorporated these investment belief statement into the body of the IPS. Today, we are reviewing the proposed revisions shortly. Next slide, please. Again, this is a timeline of the process that we've carried forward on these revisions. We do note that on the coming slides, you'll see for each investment beliefs, we presented revised language that we're proposing in green font. And so we can move on to next slide. During, I'm sorry, slide 6, if we can stay on that for a second. During this part of the presentation, we will walk through each of LACERA's existing investment beliefs, presenting revised language in green font and side by side with the original language. As mentioned, the proposed revisions come from our prior discussions and survey results as well. Our main goal here is to frame an investment belief statement that is anchored in LACERA's mission and communicated in a way that is principles-based, succinct, and actionable. This is what we worked on together at our offsite and presented as a potential framework for these investment beliefs. Next slide, please. Feedback received from trustees reflected a strong level of agreement with the existing language in the strategic asset allocation investment belief. So and in our original text, we lead with strategic asset allocation and propose to continue doing so, since it is a cornerstone of what we do. This language was almost entirely preserved. Existing language in bullets A and C were preserved in their entirety. The first sentence in bullet B was preserved, while the second sentence was expanded into what is shown in the proposed revisions section as bullets B and C. The proposed revisions build on the existing language to better reflect the interconnectedness of the inputs and the objectives of strategic asset allocation. We make a clearer and more deliberate connection between the asset side and the liability side, which per trustee feedback during LACERA's BOI offsite is considered reasonable. On the next slide, we review the second investment belief, which currently in our investment belief statement is titled Market Efficiency, and today we propose renaming to Market Dynamics. As currently written, LACERA's investment belief on market efficiency states that financial markets are largely efficient over the long term, except during times of disruption. We acknowledge that opportunities exist and strive to position LACERA and its portfolio to take advantage of that. We discussed the challenge and the existing language's loss of clarity in saying that markets are efficient except when they're not. Additionally, we highlighted the following in our revisions. One, the opportunity to make tactical investments exist when markets become inefficient. Second, a need to be mindful of the timing of capital deployment versus the opportunity availability. And three, the nuanced differences between public and private markets. The proposed revisions evolved from a view on market efficiency to one on market dynamics. We included nuanced language to suggest how efficiency may vary and how such efficiency may be influenced by dynamics. This added nuance is intended to help inform portfolio construction and is a natural follow on to our first investment belief of strategic asset allocation. Lastly, we clarified the original language in existing bullet A, referencing, quote, modest tactical asset allocation adjustments during times of disruption, end quote, to reflect the need for LACERA's investment process to what is quoted in the revised language as be adequately nimble to prudently capture attractive investment opportunities. On the next slide, we get deeper into generation of return, which will be covered by my colleague, Krista.
Thank you, Cindy. As Cindy mentioned, I will discuss what is now proposed as the return investment belief, but was previously split into two separate investment beliefs, active versus passive management and private markets and liquidity. At the offsite in September, there was discussion on migrating away from a fragmented approach to optimizing returns through active management and illiquidity and making the investment beliefs more forward-looking. When we reflect on the fragmented framework, active management and private markets were in response to the portfolio structure and market sentiments at the time, reflecting a preference for passive management. Ultimately, survey responses and the discussion at the offsite agreed that investment beliefs should be framed more holistically from a total fund perspective, and that an umbrella approach to optimizing returns better aligns with the functional framework. The proposed revisions take the broader sentiment of the fragmented framework of enhancing returns while considering fees, risk, portfolio objectives, and liquidity. As noted on the slide, the text in green captures enhancing returns through active management and illiquid or private investments in one umbrella approach, while maintaining the text in black that currently exists in the respective investment beliefs. Next slide, please. The sentiment on risk was similar, with general agreement that the belief should be more succinct. More specifically, concerns were raised about potentially redundant or conflicting language within the stated belief. Within the existing belief, some of the sub-beliefs focus on prudent risk management through diversification and taking risks that is expected to be rewarded, while others identify individual risks such as ESG and conflicts of interest to be considered in risk analysis. Prudent risk management is key to mitigating risks, which is still reflected in the proposed revisions. And while individual risk factors are part of evaluating risk broadly, from a total fund perspective, no individual metric adequately conveys risk, as noted in the opening paragraph, and therefore shouldn't be narrowed in focus in the investment beliefs. As we compare the current investment belief to the proposed revisions, the high-level takeaway is that LACERA views risk holistically across several factors, using qualitative and quantitative assessments, emphasizing investment due diligence as well as operational due diligence. LACERA believes that prudent management of risk is important and recognizes that unrewarded risk must be mitigated or minimized. Many of the existing sub-beliefs are either captured in newly framed beliefs outside of risk, such as strategic asset allocation and market dynamics, or in the proposed revisions included in the investment risks or operational risks delineated on the right in the green sub-bullets. Additionally, sub-bullet E in the existing belief was directly transferred to the proposed revisions to close out the opening paragraph. Next, I'll hand it off to Migdalia.
Thanks, Krista. So I will now discuss the stewardship investment belief that is proposed here on slide 11. And the left blue box shows the current language on ESG from our existing beliefs, which references ESG as a risk and as quote unquote relevant to the investment process. At the offsite, we talked about considering adding language to say how it is relevant since it's not exactly clear in the current form. And additionally, we discussed to potentially have ESG be its own belief statement. LACERA's IPS already has language around ESG, and what is being proposed as the stewardship belief shown in the gray box on the right is echoing language from the investment policy statement. And while it simplifies the ESG language, the spirit is consistent in this proposed draft. First, it recognizes ESG as a financial opportunity in addition to the financial risk that has already been called out. And so we are expanding on the relevance of ESG considerations. And lastly, the focus on financial implications of ESG, or really any investment, is aligned with LACERA's mission, which is to protect and provide investment returns. And as mentioned, what is shown here echoes sentiments that are already expressed in the IPS and stewardship principles. Moving on to the next slide. Thank you, Pushpam. This is the proposed investment belief on what was renamed to terms from the current investment belief of cost and fees. This proposed belief shown in the gray box on the right builds on the current belief shown in the left blue box. And you'll notice much of the original language remains in this proposed revision. At the offsite, the question posed and what was discussed was if this belief should be expanded, and could we specifically add language on the influence LACERA may have on not only cost and fees, but also on terms. And in that discussion, the feedback that was received was, one, to recognize the importance that terms are equally important in the overall cost equation. Some of the examples given at the offsite included lockup periods, giving LACERA the option to terminate at any time, increased transparency, improved legal protections through liability and indemnification carve-outs, increased control over the administration of the underlying investments, are all examples of terms that have been successfully negotiated to enhance future outcomes. And lastly, as it was mentioned, we also discussed, of stating LACERA's presence in the market having an influence on the terms and fees dictated as shown in letter A on the right side. So these ideas were incorporated into the existing investment belief. And then moving on to the last proposed investment belief on what was renamed to productivity from the current investment belief education. The proposed revision as shown on the right gray box builds upon and adds to the current belief shown on the left. At the offsite, the questions posed that were discussed were, one, consider adding language about the role that talent plays in delivering desired outcomes. And two, should we consider incorporating language highlighting that operational aspects may impact the portfolio's success. And the feedback from these two questions was generally in agreement with adding language on these qualities. And the proposed language in the right box incorporates them such that human capital and operational processes are called out in the proposed revision. And these together, plus the current education belief, are stated as essential to optimize LACERA's investment performance. And now I'll hand it to John to provide concluding remarks. Thank you.
Thanks, Magdalia. And I'll finish with several points that are on slide 14. First at the top, we recommend that the board approve the revised investment beliefs. This recommendation is based on an iterative process. It began in 2021, a discussion at the offsite then. We then assessed our current investment beliefs against our program. We reviewed investment beliefs from peer plans. We did a trustee survey. We had a fulsome discussion at the offsite, and throughout we consulted with Makita about the board's feedback and their input. And once again, this project took, better part of a year and was a really interesting and intellectually stimulating discussion, I think, for all of us. The reason we're presenting this today is that we want the current trustees to have the opportunity to act on the beliefs that reflect their input. And it is, I'll finish, and this may be somewhat of how Tim started this with, these proposed beliefs reflect the evolution of our investment program with kind of the timeless nature of our principles. And with that, Mr. Chair, we're happy to answer any questions that trustees may have.
Thank you, Steph. Mr. Grable. I have Mr. Kelly and then Mrs. Jones. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. And thank you, John and Tim and Magdalia, Krista and Cindy. I very much appreciated this. I thought it was superb. So I know you put a lot of time and effort into it, but it's a great product and you should be very proud of it. I did have two small comments. On page 10, you on the right. Can we go to page 9? You talk about, is it this one? You're talking about ESG in the proposed revision. You talk about ESG, and you say in consideration of environmental, I don't think it's this slide though, I can't remember which one it was. But you don't define environmental, social and governance to be ESG on that slide, and I thought you should. Maybe it is on 10. You do on another slide, but you didn't on whatever, I'll get it back to you, but you didn't define it to be ESG, and I thought that would be informative since this is a public document. People know the term ESG, I think more often than they do the acronym than they do the definition. And then there was another comment where you wrote financially relevant ESG. Will make investment decisions in accordance with financially relevant ESG. And now that's the first time I think I've seen financially relevant. So who's making the determination which ESG factors are financially relevant? I mean, I think heretofore we assumed they were all relevant, but this implies there's going to be some kind of analysis of these factors to determine that some are relevant financially and some are not relevant financially. That just struck me as odd.
Mr. Chair, can I answer?
Yes, Mr. Grable.
The LACERA, we are a board-approved member of what was at the time SASB, which stands for the Sustainable Accounting Standards Board, which is then merged. We had a variety of presentations with the ISSB. And what SASB has done by industry has defined different ESG considerations by industry. So I think part of as stewardship, as environmental, social, and governance standards evolve, becomes more than just a headline to something that's more substantive. The considerations vary by industry and geography. So I think that is a term of art that is used, but I think that we can, and it may be, and Scott may be in the the Zoom may be able to opine on where else that exists in our stewardship principles. But I think the point is taken.
Good, thank you very much. Again, I thought it was really well done. I think you did a great job in taking a number of complex and different viewpoints and really summarizing them really, really well. I thought it was superb, so thank you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Kelly. Mr. Dreisel, are you willing and able to make a comment? Seeing none, I got to, oh, Mr. Dreisel.
Great, good morning, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the question, Mr. Kelly. I think as John's already highlighted, the IPS does have language that recognizes that the materiality of different ESG factors might vary by industry, by the nature of the business strategy, by the geographic exposures of the company, as well as by time horizon. So just by virtue of a quick example, Mr. Kelly, consumer privacy considerations could be very material for a bank or financial services firm, but less material for a mining company, where environmental liabilities might be more pronounced. So the spirit of this was intended to reflect that existing language, but in a more succinct fashion.
Great, thank you, Mr. Dreisel. Mrs. Jones.
Good morning. Well, I have not been here through the whole process as you showed on the timeline, but I certainly see the amount of work and effort in the final product. I think that the revised language is very succinct. In some cases, it adds more clarity to the intent that I think was originally a part of the original beliefs. And then you guys also captured some of the comments that we expressed in the last session that we had all together. So, hats off to staff and the consultants and the effort in this. I think that it's an excellent work product. I just had a few, I think really just questions. Oh, by the way, I do like the revision to the ESG section. I like the term stewardship as well. I will say, being in several conferences now, the opinion on the whole concept of ESG goes all over the map. There are some that believe that, there's no ties to performance to ESG factors. And, so it's highly debated. But I appreciate, LACERA adding clarity to where we stand with ESG. So my questions, number one, start on page 8. And I do understand through the presentation that item A kind of was revised and it's kind of encompassed in item C. And I do like the way it was rewritten. I do understand the term nimble. And I just want to make sure that we're still saying the same thing, in the sense that whenever I look at policies such as this, when we all retire and we're on the beach and there's a whole new group of staff and board members, can they read this and understand what our intent was at the time? And how I interpreted the original language, really gives the option of making changes to the asset allocation when necessary. And I know there's probably other documents that are out there that give that same, direction. But I just wanted to make sure we weren't taking away from what's being communicated here. The translation is it should be adequately nimble, which implies that means sometimes we might have to, we may have to flow, we may have to move, we might have to make changes. But anyway, I just want to make sure that anyone in the future that would read this understands that this is a necessary process. There are sometimes we have to make adjustments, and I support that. So that was my first comment. And then the other questions on page 10. Again, I very much understand and appreciate the proposed revisions. I think you capture what is being said, but I just have some questions that staff, if they feel like we're still communicating the same thing, is number B, which is diversification across risk factors is necessary for risk reduction. I like that sentence in the sense that it's very succinct, and I'm thinking of times when, you know, boards and pension funds and other, you know, government agencies were very resistant to diversification. And I think we've come a long way, and I'm welcome it. And I think the reason that LACERA has done so well is because of the diversification of the portfolio. And so I kind of just, I like that word, and I know it's not in the proposed revisions, and it doesn't necessarily need to be, because you do discuss it in the sense where we talk about, you know, incorporating quantitative measures and qualitative assessments and managing its portfolio. So there, you know, it's there. It's just, I just like the word diversification. I like it. It's real clear, but, you know, that's just my thought. And then on H, with the comment about the conflict of interest, I was just intrigued of whether staff felt like it wasn't necessary to have that because it's captured in other areas. But that was another sentence that may have been a little bit lost in translation, but it could be that we feel like we captured that elsewhere and we don't need to have it here. So those were my comments, questions. But other than that, you know, I think this is excellent work. Thank you. I know it doesn't nearly show the hours and effort that went into it when you end with this document. But I know, I mean, it's not a very long document either, but I know that there was a lot of effort in working on this. So thank you.
Ms. Rivera, you have a response, Mrs. Jones, or staff?
Mr. Chair, if I can start.
Please.
And hopefully this, Ms. Jones, this answers the questions. And to the extent, Mr. Chair, I will let you know. The first question as it relates to on slide 8 to modest tactical asset allocation. Back in 2016 or so, LACERA used to have a allocation of, I believe it was 0 to 5%, called opportunistic. Others referred to it as tactical asset allocation that could be anything. And we don't have that anymore. We have, so I think that the proposal better reflects our asset allocation today. And I think one of the thing that I like most about C is the word prudent. I think that we should always be prudent at all times with every decision. So I think in many ways this enhances what we do. And I think that we have a fiduciary duty to be prudent and to capture attractive investment opportunities. And I think that we have that flexibility within the board approved ranges within the existing strategic asset allocation. And then we revisit that. And then we have structure reviews that allow for things such as co-investment and secondary. So my response would be that I think that this is stronger as it relates for the board. As it relates to slide number 10 and the risk discussion, I believe that the old B or the current B, it's still B till the board says otherwise, diversification across different risk factors, that really is part of strategic asset allocation. That's the whole premise behind what is our primary investment belief, which is strategic asset allocation. But that's the thought behind that. And then as it relates to the conflict of interest, that's in the new proposed B at the bottom as it relates to some of the risks. And it's also, obviously bolstered by LACERA's ethics policies and some of the other policies that exist across all of LACERA. But certainly this is a proposal from staff, and whatever the board's input is, Mr. Chair, how staff will move or act.
Thank you, Mr. Grable. Ms. Jones, are you done?
Yeah, and thank you for the clarity on the first item. I was not aware of that, and it makes perfect sense. You want to, get away from that language that's not being used anymore. So I understand completely. And I do agree with you about the diversification where it is discussed in the asset allocation section. I guess my thought is it's also a part of the risk factor as well. And, I'm just, the vision is that with this diversification and that there's not a time 10 years from now, or well, they'll change it anyway. This will be updated, in a few years. But I just wanted to make sure that when it comes to addressing risk, it's real clear that diversification helps mitigate risk. And you have that there, I see, where risk that is not expected to be rewarded over the long term or mitigated through diversification will be minimized. So you have it there. So I think I'm good with it. It's just, my concept is that you definitely, want to make sure that it's clear that, the diversification of our portfolio, that is key as far as risk mitigation. And so thank you. Thank you for that. Again, I'll just echo again what I already said is I think that this is excellent. And it's easy for us to throw out ideas and then go, and then you guys go and create this. So I think you captured the intent of, what we wanted to say. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Jones. Anybody else? I will entertain the motion on this item.
It's Keith, I'll second.
Mr. Kelly made the motion. Mr. Knox seconded.
Great. Thank you very much. Roll call.
Mr. Knox?
Aye.
Mr. Green?
Aye.
Mr. Kehoe?
Aye.
Ms. Greenwood?
Aye.
Mr. Jones?
Aye.
Mrs. Jones?
Aye.
Mr. Kelly? Ms. Sanchez?
Yes.
Chair Santos?
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Great. Thank you very much. Moving forward, subsection B, recommendation by Mr. Kryman regarding the economic assumptions. Mr. Kryman.
Yes, Mr. Granger will make a few comments.
Mr. Ranger, you have the floor.
Great. Thank you, Chair Santos, and good morning, Board of Investment Trustees. My name is Ted Granger. I'm with LACERA's Financial and Accounting Services Division. I'm here to introduce the speakers today and make a few brief comments. With us from Milliman, LACERA's consulting actuary is Nick Collier and Craig Glide. And also with us today from LACERA's reviewing actuary is Brent Bannister from Kavanaugh McDonald Consulting. I'd like to thank and recognize Pushpom for driving the slides for us today. So this is part 3 of the 3-part series with regards to the 2022 experience study. We're pleased to be at this point in the process. We're here seeking the board's approval of the actuarial assumptions and methods contained in the 2022 draft experience study report prepared by Milliman. This action will allow Milliman to move forward with preparing the 2022 actuarial evaluation, where they will determine the final calculations, which will provide the funded status as well as the employer and employee contribution rates. If I could just take a moment to quickly thank and recognize our business partners. Local 721 SEIU was participating with us in this process in the background. They did provide a couple of clarifying questions, and our executive team at LACERA was able to respond to those questions. So I want to thank them for their participation. And as well, the County of Los Angeles CEO's office. I wanted to recognize them for, again, participating in the background. Normally what they do is they prepare some correspondence or communication with Chiron. They work with Chiron, their actuary, to review the recommendations, the materials. There was I think there was one or two clarifying questions from them. And so we were able to answer those questions as well. And in the package today, there's a letter from the county CEO's office concurring with the recommendations provided by Milliman. The roadmap is on the screen. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that today. If I could ask Pushpam to please switch the slides over to Milliman's slide deck, and I'd be happy to answer any questions on the process while he's doing that. And if there are no questions, I'm going to turn it over to Nick as soon as we get the slides up for the Milliman presentation. Great, thank you.
Perfect. Yeah, if you can move one slide forward. All right, thank you. So good morning, all. Ted's already kind of laid out the schedule there on the roadmap. So bottom line is the key outcome we're looking for today is the adoption of the actual assumptions and methods for use in the 2022 valuation. There should be really nothing new in our presentation, as we've heard all this before in more detail at the prior two meetings. You also now have our formal report, which provides even more details on the results of the experience study and our recommendations. Just pointed to Appendix A of that report provides the complete set of assumptions and methods that we are recommending be adopted. Today, we are going to spare you all the details, so we're just going to go over a highlight of the key recommendations and summarize the estimated financial impact on the coming valuation. So moving forward to the next slide. So first we look at the actual methods. We've recommended 3 changes that are shown circled in green, as we talked about in October. The 2 that would have some immediate impact on the valuation are the actual asset method and the star reserve treatment. For the actual assets, which are used in the determination of the employer contribution rates, we recommend continue use of the 5-year smoothing with one modification, the offsetting of gains and losses, which is expected to result in less volatility in future employer rates, as we showed you in our October presentation. Next, looking at this treatment of the star reserve. Currently, the star reserve is included as valuation asset, but the value of future star benefits that would come from the star reserve are not included in the valuation. In our view, this creates a disconnect, as LACERA has an established pattern of granting star COLA benefits with payments coming from the star reserve. Consequently, we recommend the star reserve be set aside in the valuation for future star payments by excluding it from the valuation assets. Lastly, the third recommended change regarding the amortization method would only have an impact if there are retroactive changes in the benefit provisions in the future. This will not impact the 2022 valuation. None of the recommended changes we talked about today would affect the ultimate cost of the benefits, but they would affect the timing of future employer contributions. And Craig will talk about the estimated impact on the 2023-2024 contribution rates later. Moving to the next slide. On the economic assumptions, we recommend no changes, and particularly on the investment return assumption, which, as you know, is critical to a lot of the valuation results. The expected return at the beginning of 2022 was less than the current assumption of 7%, but changes in the economic environment in the first half of the year, including a significant increase in bond yields, have caused an upswing in the expected returns. So we're recommending LACERA keep that 7% return assumption along with all the other economic assumptions. Moving to the next slide. So looking at the demographic assumptions that we talked about in November, the 3 recommended changes that I'd highlight are shown in the first 3 lines of this chart. First are the merit salary increases. These are the expected changes in future compensation levels related to factors such as promotion and longevity. We have recommended increases in this assumption primarily later in a member's career. For mortality, we've recommended an update to the latest standard table for the specific assumption that projects future changes in mortality, that is mortality improvement. In general, this results in slightly lower life expectancies for current retirees and slightly higher life expectancies for future retirees. That is as compared to the current assumption. For the service retirement assumption, which projects when active employees will retire in the future, we're proposing generally small changes to rates at the different ages, but we've added a component. Currently, we just have an assumption that varies by plan and age. We've added a component to reflect the impact of years of service, as employees with high levels of service tend to retire earlier than those with lower levels of service. Note that for each of these assumptions, we consider the impact the pandemic may have had, and we've only proposed changes to the extent the changes were supported by pre-pandemic experience. For example, as was discussed by the board and staff earlier, the number of retirements has been running high due to several factors, but the proposed assumptions effectively assume a reversion close to historical norms. So that concludes what I have to say. As Ted said, another actual firm, Kavanaugh McDonald, reviewed our work. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Brent Bannister to give a summary of their findings.
Sure, I'm unmuted there. Sorry about that. Kavanaugh McDonald has been asked to come in and review Milliman's work, not simply at a high level, but actually we go in at a detailed level. We actually take the data and kind of dig through that, much more detailed than typically occurs with this kind of work. We did that. The data looks good. We've reviewed the economic assumptions. We find them reasonable. We believe, especially with kind of the time right now with markets being unusual, that this is perhaps a good time to be cautious and not make changes. Move to the next slide. The demographic assumptions, again, as Nick pointed out, this is a challenging time because of the possible interaction with COVID. We did go through and look at what Milliman proposes. We find those reasonable and believe those are good choices. And then finally, the methods. The Milliman proposes we agree with the changes and retaining the other methods. And so we believe that's all very reasonable. Next slide. Kind of finally, then we just read the report, compare back to what actuarial standards of practice they need to be in there, recognize there's style and preference differences that every actuary has. We tossed out some ideas that Milliman might want to consider, but realize it's largely stylistic in nature. Overall, kind of the bottom line there, it's our opinion that this report summarizes what has occurred and makes recommendations that are very appropriate and consistent with good actuarial practice. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you, Brent. And so now as we move on to slide 11 here, as Nick mentioned earlier, we'll do a brief recap of the estimated financial impact of our recommended assumption changes. Also, this is information that's all been presented and discussed in the October and November meeting, so there's should be no new information included here. So I will just note before I start that the estimated costs that we discuss here, they are based on the 2021 valuation. The actual 2022 funded ratio and the employer contribution rates for the fiscal year 2023 to 2024 will be calculated and determined in the forthcoming 2022 valuation. But I just focus here on a couple of parts on this slide. First of all, on the section sort of in the middle, the recommended actuarial method changes. Nick discussed our recommended changes there, and so we've summarized in this part the impact that those will have. You can see that the Total impact of those method changes on the funding ratio is we're estimating a decrease of 0.5% on the funding ratio and an increase of 0.7% of payroll on the employer contribution rate. This is largely driven by the recommendation to exclude the STAR reserve from the valuation assets, which entirely drives a change on the funding ratio and is the significant portion of the impact on the employer contribution rate. As Nick mentioned, we're not recommending any changes to the economic assumptions, so there's no impact there in the middle of this chart. And on the demographic assumption changes, where we are recommending some changes, you can see there that in aggregate, the impact of all the recommended demographic assumption changes is a decrease of 0.8% on the funded ratio and an increase of 1% on the employer contribution rate, again, for the 2023 to 2024 fiscal year. And that change on the demographic assumptions is largely driven by the changes, the recommended changes to the service retirement assumptions. The other changes that we're recommending there actually largely offset. And so it's really the service retirement assumptions driving that change there. So overall, the impact of the recommended method and assumption changes is estimated to lower the funded ratio by 1.3% based on the 2021 valuation estimate, and result in an increase of 1.7% of payroll in the employer contribution rate. And that translates to approximately $155 million of additional employer contributions. And our estimate, that would be our estimate for the total contribution rates in the 2023 to 2024 year would be about $2.3 billion. Moving on to the next slide, please. So we also estimate that the recommended assumption changes will have an impact on member contribution rates. Most members will see an increase in their contribution rate as a result of these changes. The amount of the increase will depend on which plan the member participates in. And for legacy plan members, so that is the non-PEPRA members, it will depend on the age at which they entered the LACERA retirement system. So the graph on the left of this page sort of shows the sources of the changes in the member contribution rate to sort of give you an idea of which assumption change is causing the change. And the chart on the right summarizes in numbers kind of the financial impact it will have on specific members. And I'm going to discuss those numbers a bit more on the next chart. So I'm going to focus really more on the graph here right now. But almost all contributing legacy members participate in General Plan D or Safety Plan B, and approximately half of all members have entered between ages 25 and 35. So we're focusing here a lot on General Plan D and B with entry ages of 25 and 35. You can see that the purple bar here, which is the merit salary increase changes, that is the largest factor driving the change in the member rate, and it's causing an increase. And the blue bars on the top of the purple, that's the impact of the recommended changes on mortality. The orange dots that you see there, those represent the aggregate change in the member rate. For the PEPRA members, their member contribution rates are calculated a bit differently than they are for the legacy members, where the PEPRA members pay 1/2 of the total normal cost rate, whereas the legacy members, their contribution rates are determined by a formula. And so some of the other sources of change on the retirement assumption and other demographic assumptions have an impact for PEPRA members that doesn't have an impact for the legacy members. And so that's why you see some extra colors and bars on this chart here for PEPRA members. And what we see is that the service retirement and other demographic assumptions tend to have a bit of an offsetting impact to the member contribution rates than the merit salary and the mortality impact does. So the increase on the PEPRA member rates does tend to be a bit smaller than for legacy members, just due to that offsetting. Next slide, please. And so just looking at in numbers what this really means, I mentioned that most of the members enter between ages 25 and 35. So for General Plan D members, we see that the estimated increase is about a little bit over 0.2% of pay for members that are 25, entered at 25 to 35, which based on the average monthly salary of general plan D members of about $8,200 per month. That's going to translate to about a $17 to $19 per month increase in member contributions. For safety plan B members, the entry age, the impact based on entry age is a bit more pronounced at age 25 to 35. And for safety plan B members, the average entry age is closer to 25 than to 35. So many safety plan B members will see an increase of about 0.39% of payroll on their contribution rate, which based on the average salary of safety plan B members of about $11,600 per month translates to about $45 extra contributions per month. I mentioned on the PEPR plans, that's the general G and the safety C. The impact is a bit smaller, and for those plans, all members pay of a respective plan pay the same rate. And we estimate that for the general PEPR members, the increase will be about 0.1% of payroll, or about $6 per month, based on their average compensation of $6,100. And for the safety PEPR members, we just coincidentally, but after the offsetting impacts of the changes, we were estimating no change in the member contribution rate for safety members. And so that concludes our prepared remarks. We would be happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you very much for your presentation. I have two comments. One, and thank you very much for excluding the Star Cola. This is important given the current rate of inflation, and it makes my job easier in the Board of Retirement with regards to allocating any cost of living adjustments to the retirees. So this is very important in my mind. The other issue that I would like to highlight, which I think is important, is that there's a perception there's a public perception that somehow or another this is the largest that the county is investing on county employees, and people forget that we contribute, and that every time there's changes in the assumption rates, it impacts not only the employer contribution, but also the employee contribution. Since I've been a member in the county, my contributions has consistently increased over the years, which I welcome, because we need to pay for that. It's a benefit, and we're entitled to that. But I think it's important to emphasize that we pay for this as well. So, and thank God for the tremendous investment program that we have on the returns. I believe 75% or so of every dollar that we pay out in benefits comes from return on the investments. So this is something that we need to remember. At this point, I will ask Ms. Jones.
Good morning. Thank you for the report. I was able to attend the other presentation, so I have really appreciate the in-depth work that went behind coming up with the final recommendations. Really, I just have a question. As I know, other retirement agencies are looking at lowering their discount rate. We did get our quarterly performance report, and I believe, if I interpret it correctly, that the return was just below, and when you look at a 3-year and a 5-year outlook, just below the 7%. So I guess my question is, what factors or what things would we look at to consider lowering the discount rate if we felt it was necessary?
Well, our basis for our recommendation is going to be forecasts. Obviously, we look at the forecast for your investment consultant, Makita. We talk to investment staff. We have our own investment folks, and they provide capital market assumptions. And we also look at surveys from of other investment consultants. And as I said, the thing to look at obviously is what those forecasts are. And, not surprisingly, when you've had good returns, you had these strong returns. What were they driven by? They're driven by lower interest rates, so lower yields on bonds, and also the stock market, the PE ratios went up. When you have that, you have good past returns, but it causes lower future expectations. And that's what we've seen over the last 6 months. Now you have much higher yields. It hurt the short-term return over that 6-month period of the first half of the year, but it also obviously increased your expectation for fixed incomes. It's pretty easy to see you've got those higher yields. So that's really directly impacted our forecasts. And looking at those forecasts, we're at or above 7% as of June 30th. So we think, and I think Brent said it well, there's a lot going on, but we've got, but given that upswing in our expected returns, we think now is a good time to stand pat. And I think you're going to see a lot of other systems. I think you're definitely going to see a slowing of reducing return assumptions.
Right. Thank you.
Just to follow up on before Mr. Kryman, I think it's important to note that we have moved from 8% down to 7% over the years. So yes, Ms. Jones, we paid attention a great deal, and we have adjusted accordingly. So I thought that it would be good to mention that historical perspective. Mr. Kryman.
Yes, I just wanted to make a comment in terms of our efforts to be transparent with everything that we do here at LACERA. We are going to be following up with our stakeholders about the impact on the employer contribution and also the employee contribution with the various stakeholders like ALAS, POPA. I know that SEIU has been very involved, but I think that there's an opportunity for us to answer questions in advance of the change in the contribution rates that impact our employees or our members. So we will be reaching out to each one of the stakeholders just to make sure that if they want us to make a presentation at their board meeting or they want to make a presentation, we certainly do that. And then we definitely will be communicating with our members, very email blasts or some other communications in terms of what the impact is in terms of the contribution rates. Hopefully that will answer a lot of questions and slow the impact that it has on the trustees with having to answer questions moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kryman, for that. Because typically every time we make these changes on the employee contribution is impacted, we get quite a few phone calls from our members. So yes, it's very important. Anybody else? Any other comment? Questions?
Mr. Chair, I just have a question for Milliman, actually. Nick, it was discussed earlier in the meeting today. Could you comment on Milliman's general experience or any thoughts on retirement rates when interest rates rise or when conditions in the economy generally change or are perceived to have changed, et cetera? What's been Milliman's experience with that?
Well, I think it's not necessarily interest rates, but I think it was hit on earlier with regard to salary increases with the high, if you have high inflation, that tends to lead to negotiate increases. So I'm not sure of the specifics of the recent negotiations, but if you have, if you have a pretty significant salary increase, in the next year, employees are going to tend, they're smart. They're going to tend to stick around and get that higher increase in their final average, particularly as was mentioned for the legacy employees, that makes a big difference. So I would say that's probably the primary driver there with regard to the economic assumptions. The pandemic obviously had a pretty significant impact on retirement, as both retirement and termination, as lots of people left. But I think from regard to economic perspective, probably the salary increases is going to be the biggest driver. So if you did have like a 1 year big increase in salary and then smaller increases, you might see, you might have a surge in rates at that point. I don't know if Craig, if you had anything else to offer.
Yeah, I mean, not with direct regard to the economic assumptions, but I think the only thing I would offer as well, and JJ mentioned this in his comments earlier, is during the financial crisis. I mean, I think depending on the economic cycle and how confident people are feeling about the future, that can change behavior. And so when back in that time, retirements were lower, and when times when people are feeling positive about the future, that might result in more retirements going forward. But I'm not aware of any direct correlation to the interest rate specifically.
Ms. Greenwood?
Yes, I am amused. Thank you guys very much for a wonderful presentation and a wonderful analysis. The very first thing we talked about at my very first meeting 2 years ago was economic changes and an experience study. I think that my life is just one giant experience study sometimes. And in 12 years, this is the first time that we haven't had to have a serious discussion about decreasing the discount rate. Ms. Jones, don't be in a big rush to have that conversation, because that to many big arguments, because it involves large amounts of money. And I just wanted to thank everybody for doing such an outstanding job and making these very, very challenging decisions as easy for the board as you possibly can, and let you know that I appreciate it. That was all.
Thank you, Ms. Greenwood. Any other comments?
I'll just make the motion.
And
I'll second.
you made a motion. And second.
Miss-
Ms.
Mr.
Jones, you have your hands up?
My comment was just in response to Trustee Greenwood. I've lived through the lowering of a discount rate. It's not a fun experience. I just wanted us to just discuss the reason why, we're not doing it. And if it was necessary, what would it look like to do it? But absolutely, I 100% agree that is not a good experience to go through at all. And it's
Looks
fortunate.
like, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, I was just saying fortunate that that's not something that has to be considered.
Right. Having gone through it about 6 times now, I would say it looks something to the akin of Dante's 7th circle of hell. Might be a slight exaggeration, but yeah. Thanks.
All right. Thank you, ladies. Anybody else? All right. So we do have a motion, duly second. Roll call, please.
So Mr. Kehoe made the motion, Mr. Kelly seconded, Mr. Knox,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Mr. Kehoe,
Aye.
Ms. Greenwood,
Aye.
Mr. Jones,
Aye.
Mrs. Jones,
Aye.
Mr. Kelly,
Yes.
Ms. Sanchez,
Aye.
Chair Santos.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Before we proceed, I have a request to take a break, and we will take a 10-minute break.
Mr. Santos, before we do that, if I can make a comment. Unfortunately, I do have to go. I have another conflict, but I won't be here for the good of the order. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you to all my colleagues on the board, as well as all the staff. But in the last 9 years, been serving on the Board of Investments, and 12 years total with LACERA. I'm going to be taking a 3-year break. Hopefully I'll see you all again in 3 years. That being said, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've enjoyed the camaraderie with everyone here, the deep dive of discussions. I have grown considerably as a person from all of my experiences here at LACERA. And I hope that I've been able to give back just a little bit myself. And I'm not gone, so I will still be on the board of retirement, and I'll still be around. I'm still planning on popping into offsites to see how everything is going on. But I appreciate everything here. It's been a great run, and looking forward to seeing everybody around the boardroom as we go forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Kehoe. Appreciate those comments. I enjoy very much your service on the Board of Investments. You and I have never agree 100% of all items, but when we do agree, we have worked together. And in the areas that I disagree, I respected you for that. And you've always been very vocal and represented your members and all the members in LACERA with the most professionalism that I have seen. Appreciate your service, and yeah, I would love to see you again in 3 years. I may not be here in 3 years, but certainly I will appreciate somebody like yourself on this board because your input has been tremendous. So thank you, and happy holidays to you and your family.
Definitely. Happy holidays. Merry Christmas for everyone. Take care.
Great, thank you. All right, so we are in a 10-minute break. Linda, what time are we coming back?
We'll come back at 10:56.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Calling the meeting back to order. Next item on the agenda is the, gee, I lost my place here.
We're on item non-consent C.
All right, great. Yeah, thank you very much. Recommendation by Ms. Natoyer, Dr. Natoyer, regarding approved classification and compensation changes for the accounting officer, etc. Ms. Gugliano, you have the floor. I'm sorry, Dr. Natoyer, somebody.
Yes, good morning.
Good morning, Dr. Natoyer.
Good morning. Thank you so much. This morning, we are here to present for your consideration and hopefully approval, a classification and compensation study done in the Financial and Accounting Services Division, FASD. So the classification and compensation study, 5 classifications in FASD, and the recommendations here before you impact 6 classifications because we are proposing to delete 1 classification. So this item has gone to the JOGC and the Board of Retirement last week, and this week we are prepared to answer any questions that the Board of Investment may have.
Okay, I don't see any questions.
I have questions, sorry. I was expecting a longer presentation. Let me put my hand up.
Mr. Kelly, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. I had a number of concerns with this, and I think I want to go back to a discussion earlier we had about, we talked about the word nimble, and we all know we're having difficulties with recruiting in LACERA. And I look at this plan and I don't see nimble at all in it. And by that, I mean, you have 2 major accounting functions, general accounting and investment accounting. And when you look at this, because I tried to do a little walk chart myself and it was just really too complex. So you have an accountant 1 specification, and within that accountant 1 specification, you have certain minimum requirements if you're going to be placed in general accounting, and more strict minimum requirements if you're going to be placed in investment accounting. It appears as if the investment accounting should be its own class specification. And why it's not, I don't know, because it's under accountant 1. And I just don't know why you, and this whole idea that we are allowing the people who come to interview with us to define for us what the organization should look like, I just don't get. And I refer specifically to this idea. The people come to us and they're economics majors, and they might have some skill set to do accounting, but they're not trained in accounting. They don't have investment accounting training experience. And as I mentioned in a note last night, I'm not looking for someone to determine the elasticity of demand of private equity deals. I'm looking for someone who can do debits and credits and fair valuation and accruals, et cetera. And why you didn't give us more, you're setting yourself up for the future. you're going to be limited by what the organization looks like today. So that if you want to develop a new skill set or move staff from investment accounting or from general accounting over, it limits your ability to transfer staff. I don't know why you just didn't come up with accountant, senior accountant, accounting officer, and then whatever the next highest level is, and make those class specifications very broad, and which will allow you the flexibility to manage the organization in the future in a much more nimble way than I think the plan presents now. So I had technical concerns about how you're doing it, because I don't think if you have an accountant one class specifications, the minimum requirements for that class spec have to be the same for everybody. You can't just say we're going to throw in investment expertise here. You require you require 3 courses for investment accountant if they're going to serve as an accountant 1, 2 for generic accounting. It didn't come together for me at all. And more broadly, the biggest issue is it's too complex. And I don't think it gives you the flexibility that you want today. It certainly doesn't give you the flexibility in the future, because you're building too many little boxes on the hillside from the show Weed. You're building too many little boxes. And I just think that's the wrong approach. You need something broad. You can train staff when you hire them, okay? And if you don't know how to train people in investment accounting, you're 6 blocks from Pasadena Community College. I mean, engage with them in terms of developing investment accounting staff, training for your staff. It was far too complex, and I didn't understand all of it. So I'm not going to support it, but I think it's the absolute wrong strategic approach. You need something broad and nimble, and this is not that. Thank you.
Okay. So I think there were a couple of questions there. Would it be appropriate for me to respond?
There are more comments on approach. I mean, I know we have a long meeting, so I don't want to go down point by point. I just think it's the wrong strategic approach. And below that, there are just technical issues that don't fall out for me in terms of class specifications.
Sure. Well, we were actually starting from the place where you suggest that we end. So we started with broad classifications, just simply accountant, senior accountant, accounting officer. But we found that with that classification structure the way that it was, we were not finding people who had the right types of experience to fill the vacancies on the investment accounting side. And so based on the information that we received in 2015, when we ran the recruitment, it was not a fruitful recruitment. So then we proposed that we study the classifications. And in the study, it was determined that the work is significantly different enough that we should have a separate classification at the accounting, investment accountant and senior investment accountant level. The entry level to both the general accounting side and the investment accounting side remains accountant. So just the regular accountant one, so that you can develop the skills as you suggest. You come in as an accountant, get experience doing the right types of work for the investment accounting side, and then you may be able to promote if you have the right set of educational background for the entrance requirements. So we started there. We were not getting the type of candidates, and so we're taking a different approach, which is one of the, I think, feedback that we've been hearing, that if something doesn't work, do something different. I think that Ted might be able to provide some more insight as to the types of work and different types of work that the general disbursement side and the investment accounting side performs.
Mr. Ranger?
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning again. So from a historical perspective, over time, and Carly mentioned 2015, it might even be precede that. Over time, we ran exams to hire accountants. And what we found was that we would have to sort of, I want to say, customize the exam to for investment accountants to add desirable qualifications, which largely involved experience and exposure to the investment world. So we did that, and we weren't successful in getting candidates both at the accountant level and as well at the senior or the investment officer level. And when I say we weren't successful from 2015 up into recently, even with our seniors that we promoted last year, we ended up promoting people internal But in terms of competition from the outside world, it wasn't fierce. It was good, a good exam, but it wasn't overwhelming. There wasn't an overwhelming response. So we went back and looked at our requirements and our positions, and what we really wanted was we wanted the investment accountants to really hit the ground running. I want to be able to put them in a meeting or in a conversation with State Street or in the investment office and have that language and have that skill set where they understand what's going on in the investment portfolio. So when we communicated and worked with Aon Consulting as part of the study, we expressed some of these historical as well as the practical concerns. And this is what essentially they came up with. So Mr. Kelly, I do agree with you that it is putting us a little bit in a box in terms of the investment accountant positions. I would respond to that by saying that I think it's important for us to be able to support John Grable and his team to also be able to speak the language that State Street speaks and get people in that understand the industry. So I feel comfortable with the way we've structured it to get that skill set at the accounting level.
Great, thank you, Mr. Ranger. I have Mr. Kryman and then Ms. Jones after that. Mr. Kelly, are you done?
Yeah, yes, I'm done. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Kryman.
Just very quickly, the broad categories for the technical positions, we've had difficulty recruiting in the investment accounting. The investment division has a broad category for senior investment officer, principal investment officer. In the recruitments that we ran, quite frankly, they fell short of expectations. And so we had to pivot and use recruiters. We have to look at Mr. Grable's positions to make sure that we can recruit properly. We also had the same difficulty with Mr. Rice's positions that has a broad category. And we had difficulty recruiting individuals that had the specific skill sets that we were looking for in the experience. And so it's not just the accounting positions, it's also the investment issues, the investment recruitment challenges and the legal recruitment challenges that we're having. And so that's, I'm not sure why that's happening, but we're definitely going to pivot and do something different. And we're working with, Mr. Grable, Ted, and Mr. Rice's team to make sure that we have a really good candidate pool to choose from. So hopefully that helps.
Ms. Jones.
Well, I just wanted to just share that I do support this because, I've hired accountants for probably about 20 years now, and even my sharpest accountants, I think, would have a difficult time working with Mr. Grable's team because it is so specialized. It is definitely different. I totally understand the need to have the separate classification as well as the additional pay that goes with it, because I think that pool of candidates is probably limited during this time. And we're probably going to have to attract people from, private industries. So we've got to be competitive. But I do understand the unique nuance of having an investment accounting officer versus just someone who has basic accounting experience over the years. So, I just wanted to share a different view that I do appreciate what staff is trying to do, and I'll support it.
Great, thank you, Ms. Jones. Anybody else? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion. I move approval.
I'll second it. This is David.
All right, so it's been moved and seconded. See no further request to speak. Roll call, please.
Mr. Knox,
Aye.
Mr. Green,
Aye.
Mr. Kehoe, Ms. Greenwood,
Aye.
Mr. Jones, Mr. Jones. Okay. I see you. Ms. Jones.
Aye.
Mr. Kelly.
No.
No. Okay. Ms. Sanchez.
Aye.
Chair Santos.
Yes.
Okay, the motion passes with 1 no.
Great, thank you very much. Moving forward to subsection D, recommendation by Mr. Kryman regarding reviewing the calendar, the 2023 meeting calendar. Mr. Kryman.
Yes, we provided the trustees with the calendar for next year. I believe I didn't see any issues or conflicts, but we can certainly looking forward to discussion and making the adjustments as the trustees see fit.
All right, so I have Mr. Kelly and then Ms. Sanchez.
Thank you. I would just ask that if you're going to include references to religious holidays, that they be more inclusive of the religions or faiths our organization members may hold. This is very based in Christianity and Judaism. And there are a lot of other big faiths out there that have their own celebratory days. So it's kind of, I think we should do a better job if we're going to include it, recognizing the diversity of faiths.
Ms. Sanchez.
Last year, we didn't make any adjustments for meetings, but I think they did kind of create some conflict, like key meetings like CII. And I noticed that CII would be a conflict this year again. So I wonder, I think it will. 6th to the 8th of March.
It's Monday to Wednesday. So the week of the Board of Investments meeting.
I know.
Right, so my suggestion is number one, we should not be changing the meetings around, especially for conferences. We're here to do the business of the members, not to go conferences. I do understand that some of these organizations like CII and perhaps SACRS are very important to LACERA. But if we are going to make any changes, I would humbly recommend that either move it to the Tuesday before the BOI meeting or the Thursday following the scheduled BOI meeting. But again, we are here to do the business of the members, not to go to conferences in conflict with the meeting. So any other comment? See no.
So just for clarification, we're leaving the March 8th meeting as is. Correct.
Mr. Green is saying thumbs up.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't see anyone asking or proposing any changes to the current calendar. So hearing or seeing none, we moving forward then with the agenda. This report will be received and filed accordingly. So that concludes the action items. I'm sorry.
Do we have to approve it?
Yeah,
Yes.
Chair.
Mr. Chair, I'll move to approve it. The
Well, we
calendar as
approve
is.
it. We
I'll
have the
second.
same. We have the same schedule pursuant to the bylaws. The bylaw calls for the board meetings the second Wednesday. So there's nothing to approve here. It's already in the bylaws, unless Mr. Rice correct me.
You are correct. You are correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you.
So that report is received and filed. Moving forward to reports, subsection 8, annual update on the Tide Initiative. Mr. Grable, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Blue, Mr. Rivera, and Zinkawa. I apologize, I mispronounce your last name.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll give Pushpam a minute to pull up the presentation. Thank you. And give all the speakers a moment to collect their notes. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the annual review and update of the LACERA Towards Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity Initiative. TIDE is focused on diversity and equity and inclusion, and the ands, to overuse the word and just now, I think are a critical component of our initiative. And maybe this is a combination of boasting or being arrogant, or a combination of both of them. I believe that LACERA is elevating the discussion of DE and I. We're doing this not just in our region, not just for public pension plans, but I believe that we're doing this across the asset management industry. And I think that the board and staff, we should all be proud of our efforts, because I think that, once again, this is a differentiated approach and something that we should be proud of. When you look at the cover of the slide deck, there's no name on it. We purposely leave out the names of the presenters. Maybe that's an aspect of inclusion, in that this is a total group effort. Pushman, if we could start on slide 3, that would be terrific. Thank you. As the top of the slide says, that LACERA believes organizations comprised of diverse backgrounds and managed in an inclusive and equitable manner perform better, as compelled by our fiduciary duty and articulated in our investment policy statement. That's really it. We say why we do this. Many others leave out that critical component. So if it's a combination of the ands and answering the why, I think is part of what makes our TIDE initiative unique. Part of our approach, and maybe this differs from others, is that many view DEI from the perspective of compliance or regulation, that DEI is something that you have to do. I would posit that we approach TIDE as something that is much more powerful. It's something that we do to improve the performance of the fund. And that really is, a value of the ands and the why. So TIDE, as the slide shows, consolidates various longstanding LACERA initiatives. This is our second annual review of TIDE per policy, and we're using the same format as last year. And throughout, we're going to share some observations, and we'll begin on the next slide, or move to the next slide. And this may be a reminder for some of our public viewers that TIDE consists of 5 pillars. They're described at a high level on this slide, beginning from the left with internal practices, due diligence, active ownership, moving to capital formation and industry advocacy. There's not enough time to cover all that is in the materials, but I believe this is a great reference document, so I encourage everyone to keep a copy on their desk. And the team now will highlight some salient points, and we'll begin and we'll move to slide 6 with Cindy, who will discuss internal practices.
Thanks, John. Pillar 1, internal practices, endeavors to foster a workplace that is inclusive, diverse, and equitable. Over the last year, the team expanded the investment division's internship program. We included interns from new schools and adopted a hybrid model of in-person and virtual. Additionally, the team has supported staff's career development in 2 principal ways. First, a continued focus to cultivate a mindset from allocator to best-in-class investor. And second, a strengthened track record of growing talent from within via internal promotions. Looking to next steps, the team is taking a collaborative approach to meet shared objectives with the greater LACERA organization. We are intentionally taking more active leadership roles in employee resource groups, such as LACERA's employee council team, and collaborating with human resources on recruitment channels. On the following slide, we provide an update on intern opportunities. In 2022, we diversified the representation of colleges and universities and continued to include undergraduate interns. Historically, interns were active MBA or master's level students. Today, it is a combination of both. By expanding the representation of the intern candidate pool, we not only bring a wider skill set to LACERA, but also serve to support diversity in the industry. We provide students with meaningful projects and resume enhancing opportunities. On this slide, we also highlight that since program inception 7 years ago, the investments division has hosted 12 interns, three of which have been hired into permanent positions. The following slide is on recruitment channels. Investments and HR leadership develop a deliberate recruiting strategy for each job opening. Over the last year, the team has taken a fresh look at our approach and has been working to widen and deepen the reach of our recruitment channels. We are enhancing our approach by identifying specific contacts at various affinity groups, industry and public sector organizations, as well as colleges and universities and professional networks. Additionally, we are cultivating relationships with each of these external groups to increase responsiveness and collaboration as recruiting opportunities arise. To maintain a pulse on top talent, we must keep our recruiting cap on well in advance of job postings. On the next slide, we turn to an overview of our approach.
Ms. Rivera,
yes.
Before we go forward, Mr. Knox, do you have a question at this point?
Yes, quickly. Thank you, Mr. Chair. In terms of the interns, I believe you mentioned 3 were hired out of 12 interns. Do you know how many were offered positions? Was it 12 out of 12 or?
3 of the 3. So a key component of our internship program is it's really limited to the time period, whether it's summer or it could be a spring or fall semester internship. We don't necessarily have an opening at the end of each internship, but to the extent that we have had opportunities and we had interns apply and be extended offers, 100% of them have been accepted.
And Ms. Rivera, I believe you are a beneficiary of this program. Is that true?
Yes, I am one of the 3. Also, my colleague Noah Damsky in Real Assets and Jeff Gia in Equities.
Yeah, thank you. And not to blend topics, but I guess this ties back to the previous conversation about recruitment. Is there an ability to think about vacancies that in advance that might be timed to be available for interns, so it's not just a matter of happenstance or just a coincidence that something is available? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so
Please proceed, Ms. Rivera.
thank you. If we can move on to the next slide, we'll cover talent management. So a cornerstone of what we do is described in our strategic objective of moving from allocator to best-in-class investor. This entails a proactive approach to recruitment that is mindful of various LACERA strategic initiatives, including TIDE. We hone in on existing staff skill set by collaborating on cross-functional teams and internal investment committees. This helps identify and share best practices in a cross-pollination fashion to build our collective knowledge and better serve LACERA for years to come. Ultimately, we engage in focused efforts to enhance diversity and pipeline for senior staff in succession planning as well. With that, we will transition to our second pillar, due diligence, which my colleague Dale will cover.
Thank you, Cindy. Good morning, Chair and trustees. By way of background to the due diligence pillar, for the past 5 years, as part of our formal due diligence process, LACERA has been evaluating prospective and current asset managers on strengths and weaknesses of their DEI practices. This evaluation starts with the standard due diligence form, which covers several areas, including assessing if they have policies addressing non-discrimination, including equal employment opportunity and anti-harassment, track records of inclusion and any legal infractions, governance policies they may have in place to promote adherence to their DEI policy, and any efforts to further advance DEI or address identified shortcomings. As part of consolidating our DEI work under the TIDE banner 2 years ago, LACERA added specific objectives to our due diligence work, as identified on the lower right side of slide 10. Those objectives included working towards specific goals, such as urging all investment partners to have clear DEI policies in place, including equal employment opportunity and anti-harassment, reporting to LACERA on their core investment and leadership demographics to the greatest extent possible, and encouraging several specific DEI practices at all firms, such as board oversight, pay parity analysis, clawback provisions, and the adoption of DEI practices at portfolio companies. On the following slides, will we review these practices and progress made among LACERA's investment managers over the past 3 years of the formal TIDE initiative. So slide 11 illustrates our progress against our stated goal to, over time, have all investment partners have in place clear DEI policies. On the top left chart, you see a clear step upward from the 66% of mandates with equal employment opportunity policy 2 years ago to 86% of partner firms reporting EEO policies last year. And that figure grew to 94% this year, an impressive rate of adoption over just 2 years. Firms with anti-harassment provisions presented in the top right chart went from 76% in 2020 to 95% in 2021 to 98% this year. While both are clear steps forward and close to our expectation of 100%. In some cases, firms have recently adopted policies after we encouraged them to, or after our due diligence revealed that they didn't have such policies in place. Nevertheless, we consider that all firms should have robust policy statements on workplaces free of discrimination and harassment, and we intend to continue encouraging the remaining firms to adopt the same. We note that most of the remaining firms without such policies are generally outside the US or small or new firms. And we're finding that when we ask prospective managers to consider putting DEI policies in place, most firms are amenable to doing so and have done so. And we will continue to track these numbers and will continue to ask to close the gap of firms without DEI policies. Slide 12 reviews our progress on getting transparency from investment partners. The chart on the upper left illustrates that the percentage of mandates that report demographic info on their investment and leadership teams went from just over half in 2020 to 85% last year to 99% this year, a nearly doubling of the disclosure rate from just 2 years ago. This reporting is supported by diligent work from our colleagues in the legal office to ensure that investment contracts include clauses and/or side letters requiring investment partners to provide DEI information. This is a crucial step that has particularly been prompting more transparency in private asset classes, where we had previously seen less DEI reporting, and some firms with smaller headcounts fall below the demographic reporting requirements for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or EEOC. We're finding most US managers readily provide gender and race data, as many firms already track and report this information to the EEOC. The only firm that did not provide any demographic information was located outside of the US. And while we are receiving more information, we caution that there remains data quality issues. For instance, even large established firms do not always provide consistent year-over-year info, which highlights that some of the firms are still trying to track and report segments of their DEI information. But by asking questions, firms may be more attentive to developing reliable tracking and reporting systems moving forward. Slide 13 captures year-over-year progress for the percentage of firms that have governance practices to encourage adherence to their DEI commitments. First, the chart to the far left reflects the increased proportion of firms where their boards or top executive committee are now overseeing DEI programs, and compliance is part of a strategic firm oversight, which communicates a strong focus across the organization on DEI initiatives and practices. Second, the chart to the far right displays an increasing focus on DEI in the portfolio management process, such as at private equity firms focusing on board diversity and developing HR policies at their portfolio companies. Third, the second chart from the right displays a decrease in the number of firms with clawback provisions or the recoupment of previously paid compensation. The increase in private markets mandates, where clawback provisions are less common, appear to be driving the decrease in adoption rates across the LACERA fund. Next, on slide 14, LACERA's engagement with its investment managers is encouraging forward progress and concrete actions in DEI initiatives and practices across the portfolio, as demonstrated in the snapshots of success excerpted in this slide. Slide 15 provides a quick update of the team's effort to separate DEI as a unique pillar of our manager scorecard. Currently, DEI is evaluated as part of organizational strength, and we've worked to develop an assessment framework to score all mandates on DEI. The 3 boxes across the top of the slide map the process for evaluating DEI practices at the investment managers, beginning with the due diligence process, through the evaluation of the investment manager's practices and progress, and finally for the level of progress at the firm and relative to peers. This year's efforts to assess policies, practices, and progress involved an investment office-wide focus to provide more nuance in the evaluation of responses and consistency in the analysis. LACERA anticipates rolling out the DEI assessment component of the manager's scorecard in calendar year 2023. Moving on to slide 16, pillar 3, active ownership. This is the third pillar of the TIDE initiative and is centered on strategies to exercise active ownership and encouraging portfolio companies to adopt strong DEI practices. The stated objectives of this pillar are noted at the bottom right of the slide and are focused on promoting DEI through proxy voting, corporate engagements, and public policy advocacy to communicate our expectations and encourage DEI best practices at the companies at which we invest. Slide 17 reviews our efforts in proxy voting, including LACERA's focus on board and workforce demographics. As excerpted from the proxy voting review report presented to the Corporate Governance Committee at its October meeting, this slide provides LACERA context as well as trends in the broader public equity markets and DEI. The first paragraph highlights that LACERA's corporate governance and stewardship principles encourage board diversity at portfolio companies across all asset classes and all investments. We vote proxies at publicly listed companies in adherence to our principles. LACERA votes its proxies at over 7,500 meetings and is sending a strong signal to portfolio companies by opposing 7.5% of director nominees across all markets that are not meeting reasonable expectations for board diversity. The third paragraph references trends across public equity markets as reflected in broad market indices. While strides are being made in board diversity, there's still significant room for improvement. The bottom paragraph reflects progress in disclosing human capital management practices such as workforce demographics, and a review of companies' policies and practices to evaluate its efforts on DEI and the broader impact in the community in which it operates. Slide 18 summarizes LACERA's progress of engagement with portfolio companies that appear to be laggards in board diversity. Our engagement with 3 other California peer funds has resulted in 310 diverse directors being appointed to 184 of the 231 engaged companies over the past 4 years. We request dialogue with companies to urge them to undertake meaningful board self-evaluations, identify requisite skills needed, and execute robust recruitment practices to cast a wide net for director talent, inclusive of diverse backgrounds. Our collaboration continues its efforts this year as we are in the midst of an engagement with 60 firms screened for lack of credible track record of inclusion on their board. Slide 19 builds upon our engagement with public companies to encourage our private market partners to advance DEI practices in their portfolio companies. While the data is not widely available, there have been efforts to gather private company board demographics. As enumerated in the middle section of the slide, a sample of 500 private companies show that there is a significant gap in gender and racial and ethnic diversity on those boards. Our annual DEI assessment reflects some level of DEI integration at portfolio management at a majority of our investment partners, but what that consists of is not entirely clear. So our future efforts will be focused on partnering with several current general partners to report on portfolio company board diversity and to further encourage constructive DEI practices at portfolio companies. In addition, LACERA will be working with real asset managers to report on DEI policy adherence to LACERA's recently revised responsible contractor policy. Next, I will pass it on to Ron to provide an update on the capital formation pillar.
Thank you, Dale. Good morning, Mr. Chair and trustees. For the next few slides, we'll cover the capital formation pillar, which aims to facilitate capital formation among firms with diverse ownership. LACERA takes a holistic approach focusing on all firms, which includes but is not limited to emerging managers. Stated objectives for the pillar include getting full information to the extent available of all firms' ownership attributes, and tracking our AUM exposures, widening our sourcing opportunities by looking at investment team demographics, as new firms are often spun out of established firms, and ensuring robust opportunities for emerging managers to manage our capital across the total fund. Transitioning on to firm ownership on slide 21. Here we look at the reported demographic profiles of the firms that are managing our capital and how much of LACERA's assets they manage. We ask all firms to provide information systematically about the demographics of their owners. Based on the reported information, we've broken down the reported data into quartiles to identify the range of firm ownership. For example, in the first table, the light blue box in the upper right represents firms in the US that have reported that women or people of color have an equity stake of 1 to 25% of the firm. These firms manage 7% of LACERA's assets. If we add up all the quartiles, we can see that 14.6% of LACERA's assets are being managed by firms owned in part or in whole by women or people of color. From this analysis, we have seen material year-over-year increases in AUM managed by US-based firms with diverse ownership within LACERA's emerging manager programs. AUM managed by firms with diverse ownership increased to 1.8% of total fund, up from 1.3% from last year and 1.2% from the prior year. The table at the bottom breaks down the information further to exclude assets in passive index funds that tend to be managed by large public companies. Here we focus on assets in actively managed mandates. 22% of LACERA's assets are in actively managed mandates, or 1 out of every $5 is being managed by a firm owned in part by women or people of color. AUM in actively managed mandates by US-based firms within LACERA's emerging manager programs also saw a similar upward trend, rising to 2.8% of total fund. This is increased from 1.5% in the previous year. So continuing along the same path on slide 22, we analyze fees paid by firm ownership. Similar to the results provided in the prior slide, we saw meaningful increases this year of fees paid to US-based firms with reported ownership by women or people of color. So whereas US firms with diverse ownership manage about 14.6% of fund assets, here we see that these firms represent 25.4% of total fees paid, as seen in the table on the top half of the page. Fees paid to actively managed mandate for US-based firms with diverse ownership for the total fund also exhibited a similar increase. Now let's turn to trend analysis on slide 23. Here we compare year-over-year changes for the last 3 fiscal years since implementation of our LACERA Tide initiative. One thing I wanted to bring to your attention is that LACERA has made great strides to improve demographic ownership information provided by our investment partners. As I mentioned earlier, one of our goals was to systematically collect data from our investment partners. Through our deliberate due diligence effort, we have seen considerable improvement in the results. To that end, as of fiscal year end, AUM managed by diverse firms totaled $10.1 billion, a meaningful increase from the prior year. This improvement resulted in a considerable increase in the year-over-year fees paid in the 1 to 25% diverse ownership category. AUM managed by diverse firms in this category increased from $865 million from prior year to $4.9 billion. However, when we normalize the year-over-year manager data to isolate the improvement in reporting, assets managed by diverse firms across the different ownership quartiles remained flat versus prior year. Results were similar for fees paid to diverse firms as seen in the chart below. In absolute terms, fees paid to diverse firms increased to $182.4 million. Once we normalize the fee data for improvement in data collection as we did for the AUM data, fees paid to US investment firms with diverse ownership increased by 31 basis points. Also worth noting is that consistent with our strategic initiative to enhance the influence of fees and fee terms, LACERA seeks to obtain the best possible terms available across the total fund with the goal of maximizing net of fee risk-adjusted returns. Moving on to team demographic attributes on slide 24. This slide looks at reported demographic profiles of the US-based firms broken down by quartiles. The chart on the top left half of the page shows percentage composition of investment and leadership teams that are women or people of color. For example, in the light blue semicircle in the upper right represent LACERA's mandates whose investment and leadership teams comprise 51 to 75% women or people of color. These teams represent 21% of total mandates managed. The chart on the bottom right shows the same information broken down by percentage of LACERA assets managed. As seen in the chart above, 26.6% of LACERA's assets are managed by teams with 51 to 75% women and or people of color. In comparison to the prior year, the team demographics across the 4 quartiles remained relatively unchanged. On slide 25, we discuss our emerging manager programs. The chart on the top half of the slide showed the current market value for LACERA's emerging manager programs across the total fund. As of June 30th, 2022, LACERA's emerging manager programs had approximately 1.3 billion in AUM. This is increased from 1.1 billion in the prior year. Majority of the increase was attributable to new capital deployed in hedge funds during the fiscal year. Hedge fund deployed 280 million to new emerging manager mandates, with an additional 40 million deployed in Q3 after the fiscal year end. Also worth mentioning is that there has been considerable activity elsewhere in the portfolio since the fiscal year end. Illiquid Credit made its first commitment to the recently hired separate account emerging manager for 100 million in October 2022. Private equity and global equity are in contract negotiations with newly approved emerging manager mandates and anticipate funding new managers relatively soon. The chart at the bottom captures LACERA's effort to increase the opportunity set to emerging managers. As of fiscal year end, LACERA's target allocation to emerging managers totaled 3.8 billion. This is more than doubled from prior year. The results were driven by an increase in allocation to illiquid credit, private equity, and global equity. In October 2021, the illiquid credit EM program was approved for 15% target allocation. In February 2022, the private equity EM allocation increased by 400 million with the board's approval for the hire of a separate account manager. And lastly, in October 2022, the board increased the target allocation to global equity by 5% from a range of 0 to 5% to 0 to 10%. The 5% allocation equates to approximately $1 billion, highlighted by the green text box. In line with pillar objectives to ensure a robust emerging manager opportunity that exists across the total fund, earlier this morning, the Real Asset Committee voted to advance the minimum qualifications for Real Asset Emerging Manager Discretionary Separate Account Manager. With that, I will now hand over the presentation to Cheryl to cover the industry advocacy pillar.
Thanks, Ron, and good morning, Chair and Trustees. Under the industry advocacy pillar, our goal is to influence and advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion in all aspects of the investment management industry. The 4 objectives of the industry advocacy pillar are stated at the bottom of the slide and are consistent with prior years. LACERA is a significant institutional investor, and we aim to leverage our position in the market to continue to move the industry forward on DEI issues. This includes actively engaging our community of trade organizations, managers, consultants, and other business partners in advancing DEI best practices and continuing our work with stakeholders to improve the availability and reliability of DEI data and disclosures. We believe this advocacy work helps to ultimately improve the opportunity set of investable opportunities for LACERA as more managers adopt DEI best practices, and more consistent and reliable DEI disclosures will lead to better due diligence and ultimately better outcomes. Over the next few slides, I will talk about the progress that we have made so far towards these objectives. As for prior years, LACERA trustees and staff have been active in speaking out at various industry conferences and events, spanning over different organizations and topics. Since TIDE's inception, LACERA trustees and staff have spoken at over 110 events in various capacities, and listed here are just a few of the examples. For example, Ms. Sanchez was a speaker at the Milliken Institute Global Conference and the Calipers Roundtable. Didier Acevedo and myself were moderators and panelists for various LACERA and CFA LA quarterly roundtables on DEI issues. Esmeralda Del Bosque spoke at the Women in Finance Conference, and John Grable was recently interviewed by NASDAQ about LACERA's DEI and ESG efforts. Moving on to slide 28. We are continuing our outreach with various industry organizations, asset managers, consultants, and public pension plans. During this past year, we hosted emerging manager conversations through NAIC, NAA, and NASP, and we also participated in a NASP SoCal Trustee Conference. We are continuing our efforts to find ways to work with SACers to introduce LACERA TIE to other county systems through the SACers network. We're also continuing with our work with the Council of Institutional Investors, on which Scott sits on the board, to advocate for more effective regulatory actions to enhance DEI and human capital disclosures. On the left-hand side are logos of just some of the organizations that we are involved with, and we are continuing to find ways to effectively partner with industry groups to advocate for DEI. Moving on to slide 29. One of the objectives under this pillar is to find ways to improve the availability and reliability of DEI data and disclosure throughout the industry. And under this objective, we are continuing our work with PRI, where we provided input to their DEI due diligence template that was launched this year. LACERA is a PRI signatory, and we sit on various advisory committees of PRI. We are also active members of the ILPA DEI committee. We provided feedback to ILPA on their DEI metrics template and due diligence questionnaire, which are intended to standardize key diligence areas around DEI and provide LPs with a framework for monitoring manager progress related to DEI. We continue to encourage our managers to undertake actions to become ILPA Diversity in Action signatories. During the past year, we supported the International Financial Reporting Standards new sustainability reporting framework to expand corporate disclosures on human capital and DEI performance using the SASB standards. Next slide, please. We are continuing to elevate LACERA's profile as an advocate on DEI issues. During the past year, LACERA successfully launched a series of roundtable discussions along with CFA LA to gather a group of institutional investors, asset managers, and consultants within the Southern California area to discuss DEI issues in our industry. These roundtables culminated in an inaugural conference that had over 100 attendees and featured the diverse founder of one of the largest investment managers in Southern California in a fireside chat with John Grable to speak on the progress and challenges in furthering diversity, equity, and inclusion in the investment industry. In addition, I myself was invited to be a fireside chat speaker at one of our private equity managers' annual CEO Summit. During the chat, I had the opportunity to speak directly to a group of portfolio company CEOs about LACERA's TIDE efforts and how we integrate DEI considerations into all aspects of the investment process because of our fundamental belief that DEI is an important driver of superior risk-adjusted returns. Next, I'll pass it back to John for some concluding observations.
Thanks, Cheryl. And on slide 32, I'll highlight a couple of the areas that we just reviewed. I'll start at the top on observation number 1. We are making progress. As the top of this says, 99% of our partners are reporting available DEI demographics versus 55% 2 years ago. This is because of deliberate actions and a significant amount of agitation on our part. Observation number 2, we're taking a total fund approach to DEI. It is a standard part of all diligence and all ongoing portfolio monitoring. That sounds simple, but it's not. For many, DEI is sporadic at best. And that may lead to the next observation about window dressing and about the fact that the industry is evolving. Across the industry, we may be seeing less window dressing, but it still exists. And what we're doing to confront that is we're asking follow-up questions and follow-ups to those follow-ups and follow-ups to the follow-ups to the follow-ups. It's something that that you can tell when a business partner is being potentially less than forthright. Some positives under this observation, and this is much of what Dale said, is we're seeing more board oversight of DEI policies and initiatives. And we're also seeing increased attention to equity and inclusion. This is going back to changing the mindset from a simple compliance one to one that is focused on producing, better outcomes for investors. Observation number 4, other challenges. Outside the US, it is harder to collect data, and the attributes by geography or region may differ. We're also seeing that the pace of progress on DE and I at various levels of organizations differs. Not to undermine how we started by talking about all the success that we've had in our internship program. Internship programs are necessary, but they're not sufficient. And we're really pushing our partners to do more than just have internship programs. And we'll finish on the last slide, please, Pushpam, which is TIDE is part of the board's approved allocator to best-in-class investor strategic plan. This slide identifies key updates from this year's reports, but I will punctuate a couple of points. First, we're getting better at this. We have more information and greater insights. TIDE was good when the Board of Investments approved it several years ago. It's even better today. And hopefully a year from now, I'll be saying the same exact thing, that it's better today. The last point at the bottom is TIDE has 5 pillars, as we just heard. All 5 of those pillars build on one another. And once again, that the strength of each pillar, may grow in a geometric function. So with that, Mr. Chair, we're happy to answer any questions that the board might have.
Thank you, Mr. Graybold. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, John. I think it was a great presentation, and I'm very proud of the organization's commitment to TIDE. And I think you're right. It is very well recognized. I was in New York a month or 6 weeks ago and had dinner with 2 friends of mine, both one in the investment arena and one a very wealthy investor. And they both mentioned TIDE. They had heard about it through different people, and actually both had pulled up on the LACERA website the initial TIDE framework. And that was really nice to hear. I don't normally hear things like that, and that was really good. I think we're still challenged with certain representative groups. I passed along to you, I think, some work McKinsey's doing on LGBT folks in the workplace. But also, I never see the word disability or disabled in our presentations. And I remember that we added that category a year or so ago. And then finally, I think the internship program is stellar. So I think Mr. Kremen, it was 7 years ago that I had asked for the establishment of an internship program for accountants with Pasadena City College, and it never happened. But we see the benefits of it here. And those positions, not to take away from John's category, but those positions are middle-class positions, and you don't need a degree. You just need units of accounting. They're perfect for folks, a lot of folks. I was at Mayor Bass's installation ceremony on Sunday. She talked about the need to develop and encourage development of these kinds of positions, and it's exactly that. So I hope we'll see some student worker positions in FASB or in FASD for next year. But I think we should be very proud of this work. I certainly am, and I hope all my colleagues are as well, because it's really tremendous work. Thank you again for everything you do.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Ms. Sanchez.
Thank you. I think as a kind of very enthusiastic ambassador of the work, I would say that one of the reasons that I'm so enthusiastic is that it is a much deeper and more considered approach than I think the industry currently has. And in many ways, I can't tell you how many fellow trustees and staff from other plans I've driven to our work to help them further their efforts. And I think that because the approach has been deeper than a checkbox approach, and thoughtful, and also considers our fundamental fiduciary obligation, that is what makes it strong. And I think that because it is now not only permeated the investment process, but it's permeated the institution at this point, where everybody has said this is something that we need to do as a full organization. So I obviously have a tremendous amount of respect for what you're doing, but I just want to thank everybody who ever touches these presentations, because I can tell that a lot goes into this and I know how hard it is. So I do believe that we are making marginal improvements, but those marginal improvements have tremendous impacts on the industry. Every woman, every person of color, every manager that we get to think outside the box with regard to the talent that they bring to the table, I think makes them better and makes our return outlook better. And I can probably count many, I think, under-promoted people who have had the opportunity to be promoted because we've asked for it. I just want to emphasize what an enormous impact that has on the industry. The industry is full of under-promoted people. And I think that what the responsibility that we have is to ensure that the best human capital gets promoted so that we get the best outcome. And so I see this as just a fundamental area of influence that we have that costs us nothing, gains us a tremendous amount, and has a tremendous impact on a number of careers beyond our own. So I think the impact study on that could be dramatic.
Thank you, Ms. Sanchez. Mr. Knox.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Certainly appreciate all of your efforts, Mr. Grable, and all of your team. It really is impressive the amount of progress that you've made and getting that disclosure and not being satisfied with their initial answer, but pushing for more information. One suggestion, and it's based on my perception at the Board of Retirement, is occasionally when contracting items come up, and I'm staying focused on Tide here, there seems to be some ambiguity whether this is a BOI initiative or a total LACERA initiative. So I had suggested previously to Mr. Kryman and Mr. Rice that it would be helpful, and maybe we get an update at BOR on Tide, but also discussing how it does apply on the administrative side, if it does, just so we have that common understanding, because I think there is some ambiguity and confusion right now. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Knox. Just some comments. Number one, I agree. We have come a long way. I remember 15, 16 years ago when I mentioned that I wanted to see more diversity. And one of my colleagues on the board, who happened to be a woman at the time, said to me, because I was pushing more women, and turned to me on the record and said, Mr. Santos, we want qualified people, implying that the Blacks, Latinos, and women and others are not qualified. This is the response that I got, 16 years ago. And to see where we are today, I wish that we're here to listen to us and look at this report, because it has been highly beneficial. I think the fact that we reference that is a good business practice to implement this type of a program is very important. The internship program going down to the undergraduate is a tremendous change that allows for us to also begin to look and expose undergraduate students to this business, because not that many people, especially the younger students, think about or realize that there's a career in institutions like ours. The fact that we were able to, or we had the vision to include this requirement in the investment policy is tremendous. This is something we're talking about window dressing, Mr. Grable. Certainly, we cannot be accused of that because we go deeper than that, and it's reflected in the report that I believe you stated that 99% of our partners we have engaged in the discussions with regards to the compliance with the Tide Initiative and how important it is to us. So not many institutions have that. And I'm talking about window dressing. It's easy to say, yeah, this is a program that we have, and it ends right there. But we go deeper than that, and that's how we make the change. The change has to be made not only with ourselves, our partners, but also the portfolio companies that we own. I know there's an initiative that Misaches participated on getting more women on boards, women and minorities. That was a program that we partner up with, I believe it was CalSTRS and other major pension funds in the country, because that's what we want. We want to be able to increase representation at all levels in the industry. So this is something that we should celebrate. This is one of the great reports that I have seen, and it gives me energy to celebrate this holiday season with this type of accomplishments. Anybody else? Any other comments? Seeing none, we move forward. Next item is subsection B, investment cost report. Mr. Shan, Dembski, Elijah.
Good afternoon. It's exactly 12 o'clock. So good afternoon, Chair Santos and trustees, and happy holidays to all. Today, I will introduce the annual investment cost report for the fiscal year, and then I'll hand it off to Noah Damsky and John Kim to discuss the summary expenses and fees, as well as the comparison of results over time. Moving along to slide 3. Formerly, this report was known as California Assembly Bill 2833 or AB 2833. Now it is government code, so you'll see the title of the slide has the updated name and section number of 7514.7. Going forward, we can simply call it the annual investment cost report, and that's just to give a little background. The report serves to increase transparency of fees paid to public funds to alternative investments. This information must be disclosed at least once per year in an open meeting, hence today's presentation. On the next slide, this outlines the requirements under the code and specifies the levels of reporting and components. The requirements seen on this page, as well as the following slide, are minimum qualifications, and LACERA has set a standard above the necessary requirements. Going above the standard each year, and newly for this year, we have also included fees for not only our alternative investments, but also for our public portfolio. And we'll see that in later slides. On slide 5, the various requirements are outlined, including characteristics, time periods, and metrics. This annual exercise is a large team effort made up of representatives from each of the asset classes. And without further ado, I'll turn the presentation over to Noah Damsky, and he's going to summarize this year's report.
Thanks, Tara. In the top right corner of slide 6, you can see the total fees were about $424 million, up 9% from last year's total of $388 million on slide 7. Higher total management fees and fund expenses drove the increase, while total carried interest declined slightly. You might notice the new categories, non-core private real estate and growth, and core private real estate and real assets, which were split out this year from the single real estate category. On the following slide, we'll touch on the leading drivers behind the increase in categories such as private equity, illiquid credit, hedge funds, infrastructure, and natural resources and commodities. Starting with a heat map on slide 8, the largest driver was private equity fees, which increased as the pace of new commitments has been strong while exits drove carried interest higher. Illiquid credit and hedge fund management fees have increased due to further allocations, and infrastructure and natural resources management fees have increased as the private markets allocations have multiplied with the continued transition from public markets to private markets. And now to John, who will take it over on slide 9.
Thank you, Noah. Good afternoon, Chair Santos and trustees. So slide 9 presents our alternative investment costs for the past 5 fiscal years. The bar graph to the left is the breakdown by asset class, and the line graph to the right is an aggregated view. If we stick to the line graph, the orange line represents our average net asset value for each period, and the black line represents our corresponding total fees. So ideally, our objective would be to see the net asset value grow at a steeper rate with more dollars getting invested at a lower cost. One additional note to highlight is the large change from fiscal year 2020 to 2021. This is primarily due to the initiation of new mandates, such as private natural resources and infrastructure. Next slide. Slide 10 is a breakdown of alternative investment costs by asset class. The chart on this page consists of 2 donut charts right on top of each other. The inner ring represents 2021, while the outer ring represents 2022. Compared to the prior fiscal year, the total cost increased 15%, with private equity making up almost 2/3 of the total. And the primary driver of the increase in fees can be attributed to increased allocations in private equity, diversified hedge funds, and illiquid credit. Also shown but subtle is the slight decrease of private equity as a percent of the total pie. As other private market programs continue to ramp up, we expect private equity's distribution of total fees to progressively tick down. Next slide, please. These side-by-side charts display fees as a percentage of total market value for each of the 3 main cost categories over the past 2 fiscal years. The overarching takeaway from this slide is carried interest remains relatively steady, but improvements are being made on other cost categories. This is a positive indicator for LACERA's alternative investment program. For management fees and fund expenses, the results generally show a trend of decreasing fees. Infrastructure and natural resources did finish at the highest fees per market value, but these results should be considered outliers as both programs are still in the early stages where invested capital remains low. And for carried interest, this is the most variable component of the cost equation. Although the relative percentages were generally down year over year, managers did continue to generate strong returns in a challenging market environment. Next slide. One more. And finally, this table shows the summary of fiscal year fees by asset category and fee type for our public market investments, as well as our real estate title holding companies. For fiscal year 2022, the total cost for this subset was $83 million. Unlike private market fee structures, public market investments are much simpler, where total fees are calculated as a percentage of assets under management. Global equity and liquid credit accounted for the bulk of the total fees, making up 25% and 19% respectively. This concludes our presentation. We thank you for your time and open the floor for any questions or comments from trustees.
Great, thank you very much, Ms. Jones.
I just had a point of clarification. I just wanted to make sure I was interpreting the slides correctly. When you go to, let's see, what page is it? The table that lists the current year fees, and then the second table, yes, there we go. And then, so this is the current year. No, this is the prior year, sorry. Okay, there we go. So I just wanted to make sure I understood, because I know you referenced the growth total, but the total fees for the portfolio is 627 million. Is that correct? Compared to the next year, which I think was 500 and so. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay. So then a total increase in fees was about 83. Was that 83 million?
That is, yes, that's correct.
Okay. The largest increase was in private equity. Can you explain a little bit more? You did go through it, but I didn't quite understand the dynamics. I know in the report it says that some of the fees have gone up due to outperformance and higher returns. So I know one could go higher, they're higher returns. We're not, we're getting a negative return. And so I just wondered if you could add a little more detail so I can kind of grasp the explanation.
Sure, absolutely. So if you look at the management fees from the previous year for private equity at about 119 million, this year at about 135 million. And in addition, carried interest went from 194 million to 204 million. I think that's indicative of two things: is that we continue to put more money to work in private equity, which drives up the management fees, and increased strong performance. In addition, with more capital being put to work, is generating more carried interest. So I think it's a combination of more money to work, exits, and those exits being strong that are generating higher fees.
And the strong performance meaning they're exceeding the benchmark, correct?
Yes, when they exceed the hurdle rates as determined by each of the contracts, that's when carried interest is triggered. So performance that exceeds those hurdle rates is generating carried interest.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Just as a follow-up, Ms. Jones, is that we also increased the allocation in private equity. I believe we are up to 17% of the total portfolio. And we also increased the goal of how much money is allocated on an annual basis. So it traditionally has been very difficult to deploy money in private equity in terms of meeting our goals.
Right.
But the staff has done a tremendous job with regards to private equity and getting the money out working for us.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you. I assume, and thank you for the presentation, Steph. I assume the expense categories are defined in statute. What's a management fee? What's carried interest? What are fund expenses? I think it would, well, for me, it would be helpful if there was an attachment that excerpted that from statute, so that I knew specifically what was in what types of expenses were in these different categories. That'd be helpful. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Kelly. We can definitely make that enhancement going forward.
Thank you.
Yeah, some of the contracts that we have with the different private equity partners stipulate what the level of expenses would be that would be charged to the fund, and also the fee that is negotiated. To me, the carry interest is very important, because that gives the manager an incentive. The more money they make, the higher the carry interest, which should also benefit us. So it's all good from my perspective. Anybody else? All right, great. Thank you. We move forward. All the balance of the reports, they all for information only. Does anyone would like to discuss or have a question regarding any of these reports? Seeing none, the only item that I want to make reference to, I guess, is item F, Mr. Liu's report on legislative affairs. My question to you, Mr. Liu, I'm assuming that you on the line.
Yes, Chair
Good
Santos.
morning, sir. Good morning, sir. Yeah, so I was wondering if you can just provide the Board of Investments with a brief report of the goals that the Board of Retirement, I think that it was the one of the committees approve legislative visits in conjunction with NCPERS. And so I just want to make sure that whatever effort goes into that, it also takes into consideration the Board of Investments and some of the issues that we face. I see that CII is having legislative visits in conjunction with the spring conference, I believe by the March or April. But I just want to make sure that whatever we do at the federal level as well as the state level, that also includes the issues pertinent to the Board of Investments.
Yeah, I would, I guess, need to confer with the investment staff on some of the priorities and, the issues that are of significance, to do that.
I would really appreciate that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments, Mr. Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There were a number of by our consultants, there were a number of evaluations submitted by them, which are great. But I don't recall an opportunity to give them feedback on their performance and as part of this process. And I just wanted to ask if we could somehow incorporate, maybe I missed it, I don't know, but if we could incorporate that, so, Makita's investment performance evaluations due in 90 days, if you want to submit comments or something. There was no kind of, I mentioned Makita because I think they've done a great job at keeping us in the loop on some of their efforts. And they, for example, I've sat in on some of their DEI seminars and kind of market summaries for specific quarters, et cetera. So I would like to note that in the future, just that I appreciate that type of thing. I didn't see that there was any opportunity formally for the board to provide feedback to the consultants. But I appreciate very much that they all wrote them. I thought they were very good. Thank you very much.
I agree with that, Mr. Kelly. These consultants work directly for the board, especially Makita and others. And absolutely, I think the board should have input in the evaluation. So I'm with you on that. Ms. Jones.
Really quick, and I'm just jumping over to the OPEB report that was a part of the information only. I did notice, I think it was in the mid-year where there was a decision to move money over into OPEB as a result of the year-end performance. And I was just wondering, when does that occur? What's the timing? And I think it's great. I just wondered, what's the timing of that?
Mr. Chair and Ms. Jones, is the question about inflows into the OPEB trust or,
yes,
or the investment into private assets?
No, I'm sorry, into the trust.
Yes, through Chair Santos, if I can answer that question.
Please.
We evaluate the amount of, we continuously monitor the budget, and the board of, but things both boards approved as part of our budget policy, the ability for the CEO to transfer any savings, budgetary savings, into the OPEB trust. And so we do that, we monitor it continuously, and we make the transition, the transfer over to the OPEB trust in June.
June, okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions? None. That concludes the reports. Items for staff review. I don't believe we have any. Linda?
You don't have any?
Okay. Thank you for that, Linda. Items for future agenda?
No items?
No item. Go to the order. Roll call, please.
Sure. Mr. Knox?
Thank you for all the hard work by staff. Congratulations again, Mr. Grable, on the recognition by Trusted Insights. I think it reflects well on you and of course on the team as well. Happy holidays, everybody, and have a great new year. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Green?
Oh, I echo those same sentiments. Congratulations to Mr. Grable on your award. And I wanted to give a shout out to Sean Kehoe as well. I didn't get it. I know he left early, but just want to thank him again for his service to LACERA for many, many years. And so thank you, Sean. I know we'll be seeing him on the Board of Retirement. Thank you for that. Also want to give a big thank you to the dynamic duo, Linda and Bonnie, for all their hard work. A lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes to make sure we're as efficient as we are. And lastly, I want to give a huge thank you to Chair Santos, Herman Santos. I know we don't thank the chair enough, but did a great job chairing this year, and we really appreciate all the work and dedication you bring to LACERA. And lastly, happy holidays to everybody. Really appreciate you all. I'm really proud of this board. I was smiling ear to ear, whether we were talking about our internship program or the TIDE initiatives, you know, to Chair Santos's point, to see these things go from facing opposition to being ideas and suggestions, to being fully active programs, to being really the model for not just California, but the country, just makes me absolutely beaming with pride. And I think 2023 is going to be even better. And I just appreciate all of you as board and staff and all the hard work you do. You make me really proud to be part of the LACERA family. So thank you all.
Thank you. Ms. Greenwood?
Thank you. Congratulations, Mr. Grable. I want to support and agree with everything that Mr. Santos and Mr. Green have said. This is a wonderful board to work on and a wonderful staff to work with. And I will be over at the Board of Retirement for a little while. I just don't want any of you to think that I'm not going to be thinking of you. And I may just stick my head in every once in a while to say hello. Truly, the last 2 years have been a joy, and it does make me chuckle that my service here got bookended by experience studies. I hope everybody has a wonderful holiday and a happy new year. And I look forward to seeing you all and speaking with you all soon.
Thank you. Mr. Jones?
Yeah, so just to echo, first of all, to Chairman Santos, having completed my first 12-month process, Chairman Santos, thank you. Makes me appreciate the level of difficulty that goes along with chairing a group as diverse and as engaged as this one. Congratulations to John and the investment staff. Obviously, it was really proud award, personal recognition for John, but it's also symbolic of having assembled a really great team in there as well. And I know Santos, CEO Ryman, also has a role in that as well. And then just to the general, you know, from my new not related Jones member who joined the board new this year, and to the opportunity to have get a chance to the offsite and others to commiserate with others. Again, just from a public service perspective, a civic perspective, just really proud of how we deal with each other. And how we deal with the mission at hand in a very considerate and thoughtful way through there. So I'm very proud to still be a very learning and relatively green member to that. And then lastly, to the staff, you know, I've enjoyed getting to know Jim Rice and the Real Assets team better, you know, and some of the other folks I've had a chance to occasion, because I live in the other end, it seems like, of Los Angeles County relative to Pasadena. I have yet to grace the Pasadena's office as much as I will here in the near future, but I've really enjoyed engaging with the staff. And then lastly, just happy holidays to everyone, whatever holiday that you celebrate through there. Please remember those that are close to you in your family and friendship network, but also through the spirit of generosity and hospitality, remember those who don't have someone, who maybe lost someone this year, who this time of year will be a really painful and challenging time. So also use your goodwill to reach out to them. So thank you. Happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Mrs. Jones?
Yes, good afternoon. Well, first I want to say I look forward to coming back to the boardroom. I was traveling to the conference in Africa, South Africa, Super Return. And so I am here, not in the boardroom, but I look forward to being back at our next meeting. I too want to say thank you and congratulations to Mr. Grable for his recognition. Somehow, though, I think Chair Santos, is there something we can do more than just saying thank you? You know, maybe a plaque on the wall or something that really shows what a huge accomplishment that was. I hate for us to forget about it next year that, you know, our CIO was recognized at such a high level. But so anyway, I also echo what Trustee Green said. It is so refreshing to be a part of a group who updates their investment beliefs and the work with Tide, and just so proud to be, a part and to hear all of the significant improvements and changes that are being made. So just hats off. And, and back to the conference that I attended, I was fortunate enough to be able to attend the Super Return Conference. And I've already talked to Mr. Grable about some of the contacts that I've made there. I do appreciate all the information that I was able to gather, and I'm going to be putting that down in notes and in emailing staff. But I hope that that is something that LACERA as a board can look to in the future, is possibly investing in Africa, as it is full of natural resources and they are a growing economy. And so hopefully that is something that we can consider as we move forward. But again, thank you for the opportunity to be able to attend that conference. Albeit it was a long journey, but but it was so worth it. I really learned a lot, and so I'm happy to be home, and happy holidays to everyone. I hope everyone has a great season and spend time with family and friends. And as Trustee Jones pointed out, not everyone has someone. I know this year will be my first holidays without my mother. She passed away this year. So, let's just be kind to one another this season and enjoy the time. But thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Jones. Mr. Kelly?
Thank you. Ms. Jones, I went to the same conference several years ago, and I think it took me 6 days to recover when I got back. It was a total of 29 hours. It was long trip. So thank you for being here. Thank you to all the officers for this year, and I look forward to working with all the officers next year, and have a very relaxing and joy-filled holiday.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Ms. Sanchez?
So much has already been said when you're at the end of the good of the order. But I do want to take a moment to thank Chair Santos for your leadership this year. I think that the tone and the tenor of the board meetings has been very productive, and it has been a joy to be here. I was happy to start coming back to the conference room. I think that there's a lot of, side conversations that you miss when you're not here. And so I do look forward to kind of getting back to normal in that regard. That said, I hope that everybody stays safe this holiday season, because we are facing COVID, nasty flu season this year, and RSV, which I had never heard of until this year. So, these are things that are, still lingering out there, and it's hard to believe that we've been in a constant health emergency for what feels like 3 years. On that note, every time I come to the board meeting, I feel like I continue to develop a sense of empathy to how hard this job is. And so I know I can be a bit salty at times, but it has been a pleasure to work with the team, and it's been refreshing to have so many new faces this year and new perspectives on the board, and to continue to see the effort to continue to grow and train the staff. And John, your leadership has been exemplary through, I think, what has been a tough time for anyone, for any leader. So thank you for that. With that, I would say, happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, everything else that goes with that. And I hope everybody stays safe.
Thank you. John.
Thank you, Linda. Just want to thank the board and staff for a fantastic year. I mean, we got stuff done. We got it done, and we raised our standards in the process. And I think that combination is maybe the winning hand. So I really want to thank everyone, because that's not an easy thing to do. I also, my favorite thing is to announce promotions. So I would like to announce 2 promotions. And the first is Tara Elijah. Tara, if you could turn on your camera. Tara has been promoted from in LACERA parlance is an FA1 to an FA2. An FA2 is a senior investment analyst, and I'm thrilled. And I would say that Tara makes everyone in the investment division better at what we do. Every time I ask Tara a question, she already has the answer prepared, and that type of thinking is really, once again, what makes us better and helps us, raise our standards. The second promotion, so thank you, Tara. Congratulations, well-deserved. We're all better for what you do. The second, and I'll pause for a second, if we can ask Cindy Rivera to turn on her camera. Cindy has been promoted from an FA2, senior investment analyst, to an FA3, which is an investment officer. And as was mentioned before, Cindy joined us as an intern, was an FA1, FA2, now FA3. And maybe as evidenced by today's board meeting, Cindy gave a presentation, in the Real Assets Committee. She was part of the TIDE presentation, the investment beliefs. If there is a project that Cindy isn't involved with, I don't know what that is. So Cindy, once again, helps complete everything that we do in the investment office, and brings a smile and skill to everything. So congratulations, Cindy, a well-deserved promotion.
Thank you, John. Steve Santos.
Yes, I just wanted to thank Chair Santos for his leadership. He provided excellent guidance, quite frankly, all year, not only on the Board of Investments, but his role at the Board of Retirement as well. So I really appreciated the partnership and all of his insights. They were very, very helpful. I also wanted to congratulate Mr. Grable, well-deserved recognition in his team. I do have the privilege of observing his work ethic and how it bleeds into his staff as well, and the quality of the materials that come before the board, and the clarity really comes out. And so that's a testament to John's leadership, and we are very fortunate at LACERA to have him. And so I just encourage him not to go anywhere and to stick around as long as you possibly can. That being said, I also wanted to thank my staff also, and wish everybody, when I say my staff, that includes the investment division, it includes, everyone else. I don't look at them as two separate parts of the organization. We're all one LACERA. That John coined that particular phrase. I also wanted to point out that John not only works very hard and diligent in the investment side, but he's also a very important part of the overall organization. And we have a lot of discussions that are not investment related, but how we run LACERA, what sort of work culture we want to build here. And so his insights are very, very valuable. And I know that I truly appreciate it as the CEO of LACERA. Steve Rice also provides tremendous advice in those particular areas as well. So I do want to wish everyone a happy and safe holiday. Hopefully, if you travel, you take care of yourself and enjoy your family as much as you possibly can. I do, quite frankly, am tired of 3 years of emergency medical pandemic conditions, and so I'm looking forward to spending time with my family this year. It'll be the first time in 3, and this will be the 3rd Christmas that we finally get together. So looking forward to that time together. So thank you to all of the trustees. And thank you, Ms. Greenwood, for your time here at the Board of Investments. Look forward to working with you in the Board of Retirement. So that's it for me.
Thank you, Santos. Chair Santos.
Great. Thank you for that. First, congratulations to the staff that got promoted. It is refreshing to be able to see, like in the case of Ms. Rivera, where when she was an intern, she made a presentation. I think it was her final. a final presentation after the internship to the board, and to see that she was hired, the role that she's playing, and now the fact that she's being promoted is a testament to our efforts. And thank you, Mr. Grable, for having the foresight and be willing to implement the internship programs that we have in the organization, and the quality of those interns that went higher. So I credit you for that. Thank you for my colleagues. It's been a pleasure serving you as chair. It's wonderful to see, as I get closer to my retirement from the county, and of course my tenure here on the board, to be able to see how far we have come from when I started roughly 20 years ago, and my colleagues on the board then, they are thinking so different than the reality back then, and the big fights that we had to be able to make those changes that now we all take for granted, and that now we are really enjoying the fruits of all the work that was done. I'm going to credit the changes that we have had in LACERA, not only because of the quality of staff that we have, especially the leaders of the organization, but also the change in the board of supervisors. I think that when the term limits kicked in LA County, it allowed for the 5 women who sit on the board of supervisors, and the appointees to this board reflect that. And I think that's really important for us to remember, that the quality of trustees that we have today is totally different than what I experienced 20 years ago. And I always have tremendous respect and admiration for the services that the appointed trustees provide, because you do it for free, pretty much. And what you always have, again, thanks to the board of supervisors, they appoint qualified individuals. Our diversity reflect that, coming from the board of supervisors. So it is, I will say that in addition to the work that the staff has done, I believe that all the changes that we have been able to accomplish in LACERA from the board perspective is reflected on the work that a lot of the appointees have done. For example, with regards to the Tide Initiative, I want to credit Mr. Wayne Moore. He was a force when he was on the Board of Investments. He was relentless, and it was refreshing, because I have been working for many years with others on the board, but Wayne Moore came in and he grabbed the bull by the horns, so to speak, and he pushed it forward. And he was one of the individuals who suggested that the internship should be undergraduate, and we should also work at the high school level, which is important. We need to expose a lot of the young people to this industry. So again, thank you for the appointees. I really appreciate your service. You have no idea how wonderful you have been. And as a member, I really appreciate the work that you do here. Ms. Jones, thank you for going to Africa. I think that's very important. It really gives me pleasure to see that you were able to attend and bring back all this information and pass it on to the staff. It is really important that we remember that areas like Africa, Latin America, the emerging markets, those countries are up and coming. One thing that we can learn from Latin America is the ability to fight inflation, because they've been through it many times. So we learn a lot, but also like with regards to Africa, it's tremendous opportunities. that will come, and we need to be up there. We need to, well, maybe not today. We are able to invest, but we need to maintain those relationships because things change, and you never know when a tremendous opportunity comes from a particular region, from some of those managers. And it's wonderful when we see the reports that the staff has been monitoring these different funds for years. It just really gives me great satisfaction. It allows me to sleep at night when I see that the staff have been following different managers, and then years later, they decide that it's a good opportunity to recommend for us to invest with a particular manager. So it is great. Looking forward to working next year. You will have a new chair. Hopefully we will help and provide the support for the new chair next year. And happy holidays. Again, it's a pleasure working and with all of you. Thank you for being so respectful and patient. It's as somebody mentioned, it is hard to manage a hybrid meeting, but we have done a great job, I believe. And thank you for my colleagues and the staff for working diligently with me on that. And so happy holidays to everyone, and Happy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you. And that concludes good of the order.
Great. So we need to set the room, clear the room. So let's take a 5-minute break, Linda.
Yes, we can take a 5-minute break.
Do we need more time than that, or 5 minutes is fine?
5 minutes is good.
Okay, what time will we be back?
So we'll be back at 12:45.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Santos, I have a hard stop at 1:45. I'm guessing that'll be fine, but just as a heads up.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.